Okay, I guess that hasn't been a minute, but should we call the meeting to order? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note that we have one other business item on the agenda. Do we have any additions?
Any other additions? No.
Richard's taking care of it.
Moving on to our first item, we have a delegation from Nicola Spurling. She'll be speaking on the topic of installing a Pride Rainbow Crosswalk in Coquitlam.
Welcome, Nicola.
Thank you.
Just so everybody is clear, we have an acting mayor schedule, and all of us councillors take turns being acting mayor every 6 weeks, and it's my turn, so part of our role is to chair the meetings while we're acting mayor, so that's why I'm chairing the meeting today. It's my turn. So I just want to remind you, today's meeting isn't a decision point meeting. It's an opportunity for you to present, and we will listen. And I'm going to suggest that maybe we'll open up the questions and discussion after the second speaker, because your topic is the same. Okay. If that's okay with you?
Absolutely.
And just to remind you that you both, when you registered, acknowledged that you would speak for 5 minutes.
Yes.
So we're going to hold you to that.
Okay.
Thank you and welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting this on the unceded territories of the Coquitlam First Nations. I am speaking in favor of the installation of a rainbow crosswalk and a trans crosswalk here in Coquitlam. As a queer person who's grown up in the Lower Mainland, moving to Coquitlam was a scary prospect. There was not a sense that moving here was moving to a friendly area. It wasn't until I started canvassing Coquitlam during the provincial election that I discovered how wonderfully accepting the majority of Coquitlam's residents are. There's no one solution to changing people's perceptions of a city, but there are some important steps that we can take. Crosswalks can be transformed into public art, which highlights the diversity of our city, and makes sure that residents and non-residents alike know that we're welcoming and accepting of everyone. The people here today and the people that signed the online petition clearly show that Coquitlam residents want this message to be made abundantly clear. I spent the last month asking residents where they would like these crosswalks, and consensus is that they should be in a visible, meaningful, and high-traffic area. So based on those conversations, I'm proposing that a rainbow crosswalk be placed on Pine Tree, near City Hall, the library, and the SkyTrain. And I also propose that a trans crosswalk be placed in Maillardville at Marmont and Brunette, in an area that's close to the park, where there is an art district and where the apartment units are relatively affordable for marginalized folks who are on a lower income. While I've been listening to those in favor of this idea, I've also been listening to those who oppose the idea. And there are 4 reasons for this. The first reason is simply disdain for those who are different. And there's no place for hate here in Coquitlam, so I'm not going to bother to address this. The second is cost. And I've heard some quite outlandish numbers from those who oppose the idea, but often these come from comparisons to crosswalks such as Vancouver's, whose scope also included the landscaping and purchasing of picnic tables. The cost in New West, for instance, was just $7,500, which is not significantly more than your average crosswalk. These crosswalks, or the third point is that these crosswalks highlight difference rather than acceptance. The rainbow crosswalk is all-inclusive. It doesn't signify difference. It's a universal symbol of diversity and acceptance that many cities are using. The trans crosswalk does highlight differences, but it does so in order to show support for some of the most marginalized folks in our community, and for people with a staggering attempted suicide rate of over 40%. The city doesn't make proclamations. That's the fourth point. The City of Coquitlam uses the dictionary definition of a proclamation, which the Oxford Dictionary defines as a public or official announcement of an important matter. By that definition, the city already makes proclamations regularly. However, in speaking with a number of you, I've found that the city doesn't provide written proclamations. And when you consider that a crosswalk is art in the form of a symbol of diversity and acceptance and welcoming, it doesn't fall under either the official definition or the city's interpretation of a proclamation. This is further demonstrated by Maple Ridge, who, despite having the same policy, installed a rainbow crosswalk last year. So I hope that you'll seriously consider the meaningful impact that such symbols will have for people who are marginalized, who face discrimination, and who want their city to show its acceptance of them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nicola. You're very succinct. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Nobody else testified.
I'd like to call forward our second delegation. Ian Soutar will also be speaking on the topic of installing a Pride Rainbow Crosswalk in Coquitlam.
I'm going to have to put a timer on myself so that I can see it because I don't have notes. I'm more rambly.
Welcome, Ian.
Thank you for having me. Council here, everyone here, it's fantastic. Everyone else who came to show their support, I'm really glad. Oh, everyone else that came to show their support, as well as everyone who's already here listening to us, is already a fabulous sign for both Coquitlam and our country that this is an accepting place where we are allowed to have this dialogue. There are a lot of places in the world where you don't get to even have conversations about this in public, much less at this high level of decision-making processes. So this is really an honor both as a Canadian and as someone living in Coquitlam and as a gay person living in this world, which is not always set out to make all of us feel the best we can all over the place. I'm a very international person. I've lived many years overseas. I'm involved with international organizations both through Rotary and through the Green Party and many other places. So I'm frequently exposed to the way the whole world is, and you don't often get the feeling that the world is very accepting. And I'm just some white guy. I'm really privileged as far as people go. So I grew up in a really nice family. I grew up in a rural town, which never was really actively aggressive towards me based off of my sexuality, which I didn't even know at the time. So thank goodness, because it was very hard for me to grapple with that myself, just looking at the larger perception society has towards us and seeing only stereotypes perpetuated on in media and so forth. That's not something you really want to be part of. But it turns out it's a much bigger world than that. Learning a lot about myself and my community, there are many faces to it. And that, I think it's interesting we're talking about the rainbow crosswalk. Typically it's associated with the LGBT community. It's not just that, because just like a rainbow, we're all part of this bigger picture, and that's what's really ultimately being represented here in a rainbow. And that should be good for everyone, right? And we've taught, for me, as someone living in Coquitlam, it's so hard to believe that we don't already have this, because we've got places like Abbotsford and Maple Ridge. It's like good for them and stuff, but how is it not? It feels like it would be a natural progression through Vancouver. And it's like, well, what's different here? Is there something different? The people I know in this room, the people I've met since I moved to Coquitlam, are all very nice and accepting. And it's not that we're not accepting people. It doesn't seem like that, it's just not, we don't accept LGBT people in this community, so we're not going to have a crosswalk for them. That's not what's going on here. So I'm not worried about that. It's just, having heard firsthand accounts of how things went in Maple Ridge when they unveiled the crosswalk, it's not a feeling you can quantify. You have to be there to sense that relief people have. Oh, thank goodness we knew this, and now we can show this, and now we know the status quo in this country is some of the best in the world as far as this marginalized community goes. But now we have a real way of it's a way of actually quantifying it on the ground, literally in this case, to say we are accepting. It doesn't take all that much effort to do this. This is the very least we could do. One of the arguments I actually heard about this was, why would you spend money on a crosswalk instead of spending money on something that's more meaningful, that's going to directly impact their lives, like mental health programs or funding youth programs and stuff. Well, we should do that all as well, right? I mean, if we have to be saying, why don't do this and do this and do this, these are all proven methods that work as well. We should definitely do that. This is just like, in the meantime, kind of the least we could do is just spill some paint on an otherwise boring piece of asphalt. Anyway, so trying to wrap up here. It's really, despite all of these things that have been granted towards me in my privileged life, I still a trouble everywhere I go. Do I talk about my husband or do I talk about my partner? And especially someone going into politics, that's something I had to wrestle with in this recent past year. If I'm going up on stage, I don't have to talk about my husband. I could talk about anything else, but why should I be deterred from talking about who I am just because I'm worried about I'm going to lose a vote or not, because there are bigoted people who seem to think maybe it's okay that they can say something or do something or not do something. Maybe it's not going to come directly to my face, but that has sort of the mental health aspect as well, where, I'm thinking about this all the time, every day, everywhere I go, and I'm thinking about this despite my privileges. Everyone else who's got more to worry about, like they're a woman, they're a person of color, they're of a faith that's not widely accepted, I don't know how they're getting by if I still have to worry about this. So anyway, wrapping up, it just seems like the least we could do. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
Want to bring them both forward?
Did you want to come up?
The chair right here. Cool.
Is there any questions or comments from delegations? Councillor Reid?
Speak up, because my comment was probably rather naive to you, but it certainly wasn't to me. I have a belief that inclusiveness, it's written here for me, which it's written much better than I've probably said it, was created by everyone's the same. So why treat any group differently? And so this is just what I felt. And I felt that I lived in Palm Springs for 5 years. And I will bet you out of the group of probably 30 or 40 people that I knew, I would say probably 60% of them were gay. And I've never had so much fun in my life. But they don't run around wanting to have all these big visual things. It's an accepting place. I don't know how to explain it. So when it first came up, and I remember having a conversation with Councillor Wilson, just saying, why do they need to bring attention to this issue when I believe Coquitlam in Canada are accepting of this? So I found it curious that it became such an important symbol to you. I would like a symbol for old people, but I guess we've got enough of us now that one day I'll get one.
There is one.
Yes. It's just that I just don't understand having to make a statement about something that is so accepted by, I would say, most people. There's also a comment out there that I did hear, and no one who said you spoke to someone, no one's spoken to me. Whoever you phoned, it certainly wasn't me. But a couple of comments from seniors, which I almost will be one, right, Richard? Almost. Is that it's a good thing. No, they don't think about it anymore because it's just accepted. In their lifetime, 50 years ago, it wasn't so accepted. So it's just something that's evolved, and I would feel that there's general acceptance. So I just wanted you to know my point of view.
Thank you for your point of view. And to touch on the issue of acceptance, the world that you're describing is the world that I think we all want to live in.
And you don't think we do?
No.
As queer people, I can tell you for certain that that's not the world that we live in, and that's the reason why symbols like these are so important for people like us and people who are different and people who are either visibly different or who simply stand out for being who they are as people. So to live in a world where you feel completely accepted is a huge privilege. It's a privilege that I have had in my past and that I no longer have now that I'm out as a queer person, and I very much saw the difference when I made that shift in my life.
So it wasn't your feelings coming out. It wasn't your perception. You really feel the world doesn't accept.
That is the general perception that you'll find among just about everyone who is perceived as different.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
If we look at statistics even, especially now as our government is forming a ministry on mental health, we're starting to actually take this very seriously as something, and it's going to require a new way of thinking. We look at the numbers, the more marginalized you get, whether it's the higher your suicide rate is going to go up. And we're looking at this from a mental health perspective. The more and more marginalized you get, the more and more at risk you are. yes, it makes sense. Yes, we should treat everyone the same when it comes to things like social justice or human rights. But when we're looking at people who are suffering tangibly, numerically, in things that cost our system a lot of money, by the way, when they don't go treated well, you can't treat everyone the same. You have to say, and not to say that we're going to look at gay people as, or queer people as, oh, there's something wrong with you, but we would say, you're probably at greater risk of suffering from depression or anxiety or something, which we know is really important, especially considering traumatic events that can happen to all of us, or not all of us, typically most of us. And the more marginalized you get, the more likely you are to have had a traumatic experience, PTSD, and so forth. Blah blah blah. It doesn't. I'm not a mental health doctor, but I do know that we all suffer from that, especially the more marginalized you get. And as much as I would love to believe that, yes, we're all, and yet the status quo is acceptance, yes, but that doesn't mean that's what we're all doing. As much as I love to have the faith in good in people, that's not how I've experienced it either. And this is despite my privilege. So I know people in less privileged positions, in more marginalized areas, are more likely to experience far more than I ever have. So
thank you. I'm happy to accept your information. I'm sorry that you feel that way.
Thank you so much for listening.
We have quite a speakers list. Lots of questions for you. Next to ask you a question is Mayor Stewart.
And I'll echo Councillor Reid's observation or final words. And I accept that there is a stigma. I accept that there is, among many of our population still, that remnants of historical wrongs and such. And that's unfortunate. We have to fight against that wherever we can. And I also accept the rainbow as having been adopted as a symbol of that inclusiveness that we're all looking for, the world that you want to live in, as Nicola described it. And that's why I initially said, I'm in. Let's find a way to use the rainbow. It has been used in Coquitlam. It's on the stairs at Evergreen Cultural Center, for example. It has been used in Coquitlam specifically for that purpose, but and it was words that Nicola mentioned, and I didn't write them down, but it's about inclusion. This includes everybody. It doesn't single anyone out. And then you mentioned that the trans crosswalk is meant to single someone out, single out a group. And so I know you've got an answer for this because you expected the question, but I'm trying to understand how, if we embrace the rainbow. The rainbow actually is used in lots of other countries for other purposes to deal with diversity related to cultural or ethnic diversity. In Italy for peace, there's lots of uses of the rainbow. It's not exclusively for this issue. So adopting the rainbow could well be that symbolism that we are diverse, and we celebrate, not just accept, because that's wrong, we celebrate the diversity that is Coquitlam. And then singling one out flies in the face of that. So I'm trying to figure that one out.
So these are two very different proposals. Like you said, the Rainbow Crosswalk is a symbol of diversity and acceptance that's universal. It applies to absolutely everyone. The Trans Crosswalk is specifically showing support for a very marginalized portion of our community, and I think that that's an important stand that cities need to take, and whether that is trans people, whether that's other marginalized groups, I think that having symbols that show acceptance for people who are different, people who have suicide rates of over 40%, is really going to help to tackle the issues like the suicide rate, and to help to remedy some of those wrongs that have been done and some of those wrongs that are still happening.
Okay, so one of the, you cited a number of objections that you'd heard over this, or concerns that you'd heard. My daughter has mental health issues. She's very public and open about that, and she embraced the rainbow to some degree because of the stigma that she faces. I'm not equating mental illness and LGBTQ or anything like that, but there's certainly there are people who adopt the rainbow for those other purposes. Mm-hmm. And one of the other objections that I'd heard is that if we go down a path of accepting, say, the rainbow, let's say we accept the rainbow, the concern was, well, what happens when another group wants another crosswalk for another purpose?
The slippery slope argument.
Had you contemplated that it's possible that attaching the trans crosswalk lessens the likelihood that we're going to find universal acceptance of the concept of a universal crosswalk.
Yeah, and so I would hope that all of you would view the Rainbow Crosswalk and the Trans Crosswalk as two separate issues. I think it's very easy to say the Rainbow Crosswalk applies to everyone. There's no fear that you're going to go down a slippery slope, as some might say, if you approve a Rainbow Crosswalk. The Trans Crosswalk, I can see that argument. However, I think it's important that the city does show support for people within the community that are marginalized, and that's not just trans people. So if there are other groups that are marginalized, I feel that going down that slippery slope is a good idea.
If you said earlier about have a recognition for old people as well, and you said there is already that thing. Well, I wish I had known about it as well, so I could bring that to the table here as well. But why not celebrate that as well, right? I mean, a crosswalk is one example as well. I am down like Chinatown for a crosswalk, but there are other ways of, we could be innovative about this as well. We could make a statue. We could do something. We could change lights or something. You could paint up the SkyTrain line. We don't have to fit this into a little box. And maybe for other groups as well, there are other ways to show that. Like maybe you get a flagpole where you switch it up, because Lord knows there are so many different flags to represent all these different places. And it is, but as it is a sensitive area, of course, you can't just say, oh, we're going to take everything as well, right? Because there are a lot of really divisive, polarizing things. But we're the people everyone at this table, or the people who work in City Hall, help get to make the decisions on what that is, right? And so we can say, LGBT inclusivity for everyone, that's fine. Looking at trans, we know we want this to be all right. That's fine. If you go to something like Black Lives Matter, okay, now things are going to start getting a little bit, okay, we've got racial stuff going on here, but trans is something that goes across, affects everyone, right? It's not specific to a religion or a ethnic minority kind of thing. And even that is not necessarily something, especially considering Coquitlam is as racially diverse as it is, that's super worthwhile as well, right? Or maybe it's funding an education program at school, right? There are tons of ways that we can do this. This would just seem like, if we can't, those are also really good things to do as well, right? But the easiest thing, this feels like the easiest thing, right? Does that maybe, or?
I think crosswalks, when it comes to rainbow crosswalks, they are universally used as symbols of diversity and acceptance, and we're seeing cities like Whitehorse, like Lethbridge, use the trans crosswalk as well. So, like Ian's saying, like I've been saying, we would like to see symbols for other marginalized groups as well. Maybe those symbols are different, and the reason that the trans crosswalk came up is that it has been used by other cities in Canada. It's an opportunity for Coquitlam to be the first in BC and to really show that Coquitlam is a diverse and accepting place, because that's not people's perception, even within the Lower Mainland, of Coquitlam and of the Tri-Cities area.
And again, just not to say that we're inherently accepted as not inclusive, right? Okay. That's just the feeling, right?
That's fine. I realize you weren't stating a judgment. I've got two other points. I'll try to really quickly. I'm glad you finished on the race side of things, because there are some racial realities. There are some ethnic diversity realities of Coquitlam. We are one of the most diverse communities, and because of that, we have a committee called the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee. We don't have smaller committees called the Asian Canadian Coquitlam we have multiculturalism, because we want to celebrate the diversity of our cultures, our cultural diversity, and it might be awkward if we then singled out, say, the Afghan as particularly put upon, and therefore needing particularly more recognition and their own committee. So it's among our challenges. And my last point, and I'm trying to explain to some degree the deliberations that council has had, or rather the deliberations that people have, our community has had, in regard to this kind of an issue. And on the proclamation side, the reason, I believe, I wasn't on council at the time, but council made a decision a couple of decades ago to not issue proclamations, and it relates to the Nazi question. under Supreme Court, the ruling was that if you issue a proclamation, you can't deny a proclamation. And actually, I believe it was a case related to Pride, that people were issuing proclamations on Multiculturalism Day and proclamations on Swedish Canadian Day. And along comes a Pride group, and a mayor said, "No way am I signing a Pride proclamation." And therefore, someone challenged it, and it may not have been Pride, but I believe it was, challenged it. And the court said, you can't single out a group and refuse to issue a proclamation just because you disagree with them. And then comes the Nazi one. So along comes the Nazi party and says, how about Nazi Party Day in Coquitlam or in Vancouver or whatever? If they came under the law, we wouldn't be allowed, if we issued proclamations, we wouldn't be allowed to deny them a proclamation. We can deny everyone a proclamation. We can say by policy we don't issue proclamations, but if we by policy decide to issue proclamations, we must issue them to anyone who asks. And so that was a decision of council. Again, I wasn't on the council of the day.
I was.
And council since then has not acquiesced, but confirmed that decision, that position to not issue proclamations. Part of it is the sheer cost of the various groups, and I go to lots of I talk to lots of council members who say we're always issuing proclamations, but I wouldn't have that objection. But I understand those who, and myself included, who would never want to be put in a position of having to sign a Nazi Proclamation Day or some other situation like that. So that is the background on the proclamation side of things. We have never issued proclamations since then, and not that I'm counting this as a proclamation, I'm just saying that's the reason for that.
Right.
I know the social media discussion about proclamations.
And so I think when it comes to Nazi proclamations, for instance, that would fall under our Canadian hate speech laws. So I would argue
it was only an example.
Right. So I get that, but there are also provisions in place to protect cities from an issue such as that arising, and that would be hate speech laws in Canada, for instance. But we also have, when it comes to proclamations, a little bit of an issue here in Coquitlam because Coquitlam doesn't define a proclamation. And so that was something that I'd come across when I was looking into whether a rainbow crosswalk or a trans crosswalk might be considered a proclamation. And the definition of a proclamation is simply an official statement by the city, which means any Facebook post the city puts out is technically a proclamation and is in violation of the city's policy. However, I
just want to clear up. The mindset of the council that passed that policy is what was at issue, and I assume, because there's someone here who said simply they were proclaiming that, I use the word, that we will no longer issue written proclamations, because that's what they were issuing at the time, and that's what they stopped issuing. So.
Exactly. So if we're talking written proclamations, the crosswalk is very clearly not a written proclamation.
Yes. I'm only explaining the background of proclamations.
This is actually an issue that's come up across the Lower Mainland recently as well. We had that there was the big rally in Vancouver recently as a protest rally to the white supremacists who were gathering. We're in an interesting system where we're not at fault until you've done something wrong, and so this is not, and it's not unusual to the rest of the world as well, because hate groups are spurting up all over the place because they've realized that their free speech is also entitling them to say what they want to say, unless you've got some rules in place where people that can assess that before or something. This is, at any rate, this is a time to be innovative, because this is not a problem that's going to go away, right?
Only explaining.
That's fact, and I'm glad you explained that, because then it's not just. I get in the past it might have been easier to say, well, we're just not going to do anything, which is fair. I guess that does make a lot of sense at the time, but especially as this is something that's growing to be an increasing problem globally, this is a time when we need to get together with our really innovative leaders and really progressive places like Coquitlam, which are full of brilliant thinkers, and find out how can we combat that in the future, because it would be really great to be able to say white supremacists should not be allowed to get together like this, because we know inherently as a society that that's wrong, and that is a slippery slope. Yes, I get that, but this is it's highlighting the point that we need to start thinking creatively, because these problems aren't going away just by ignoring them.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have a question for you, and then followed by Councillor Hodge and Councillor O'Neill. So you just referred to perhaps maybe the city installing some sort of other symbol. Doesn't necessarily have to be a crosswalk. I just want to hear your thoughts on perhaps, on the weekend, me and a couple other people in this room participated in a diversity challenge on the Coquitlam Crunch. And that was an event created 8 years ago to celebrate and embrace a diverse, inclusive community in Coquitlam. And it's a fantastic event that's really grown. And we're twinning the Crunch stairs. So potentially, it depends on everybody here, but there's a set of stairs that's being built that potentially could be painted in rainbow. And that would be visible from very far away. I don't know if you're familiar with the Crunch. I just want to hear what your thoughts would be if that would be a discussion point for us to take away.
So I think the purpose of a rainbow crosswalk or a trans crosswalk or crosswalks in general is that they have been symbols that have been used by other cities, and so it's a very common symbol for diversity and acceptance. But the main goal behind the crosswalks is visibility and to be seen by people entering the city. So that's why the hope was to have it near transit, or to have it near the library, or to have it near City Hall as a symbol that the city itself is the one that is installing this fixture. So ultimately the goal is visibility, and if that means something else other than a crosswalk that is highlighting our diversity and acceptance, I don't see an issue with that. But I also think that crosswalks are some of the most visible ways of doing that, and some of the most recognized ways of doing that within Canada particularly.
I guess there's certainly a way of quantifying the differences between them, I'm sure, because there must be people who keep some sort of track of how often the Crunch is used, because I saw a survey come out recently about that. And
it's very popular.
Right, yeah, no, it's fabulous. And yeah, I really just throw I don't have a wealth of ideas about that. I've only recently been exposed to my own community as far as actually out there and doing stuff and being a voice, but it's really just so like I say, crosswalk is the standard, which is fine. If we found that there was a way that would be way cooler than that, I think, or that's or like more like next level kind of thing, that there must be a way of quantifying that too. So this sounds awesome. Like really, lots of ways to do it for sure. But that would be pretty cool, I think, as well.
And on that note, I saw some discussion online. Another councillor also suggested that, and I wanted to just let you know that Councillor Zarrillo isn't here today because she's away at a conference. Where,
walking across the rainbow,
representing Coquitlam. So I should have said that at the beginning of the meeting that she sends her requests. Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Okay, and thank you both for coming today, and I think it's been a good discussion both online and what we're having today. I like the opening comments, particularly about accepting, welcoming, and inclusive, and I think those are things that certainly that's the Coquitlam that I want to see, and the Coquitlam that certainly I'm raising my kids in. So. And then we come down to how do we symbolize that, or do we need that? And I to an extent I agree with Councillor Reid. It's unfortunate that we need to do that, but I understand why, and you spoke very passionately about the reasons why, and certainly when you look at certain parts of that community where the suicide rates are very high, that's just astonishing that is happening, and I think that. If we can do something, even if it is just symbolic, that if somebody's having a bad day and they can look and sort of see that and say there are people that support me, then I think that we've achieved something. I think that we should do a crosswalk. I think I like the idea. This isn't the place we're going to have the discussion today. I do have some concerns about whether it's going to be where, and some of those are discussions for staff, and there's some technical things to work through, and I appreciate your comments. I certainly have some ideas as well, but I think if you're going to do it, it has to be symbolic. On the other hand, I think that the idea of doing something that other communities aren't doing, such as maybe doing the steps on the Crunch, where you can see it from across the city, maybe that is an option. So when I say I think we do something, the crosswalk, yes, maybe it's something that's even better than a crosswalk. And I think at this point we have to sort of look at all options there. I see this outside of the proclamation policy. There was quite a discussion, and I was involved in that discussion about why we don't do proclamations. And I don't know that we want to, at least here and now, open up that discussion, because I think there are reasons why. But in one of my posts I said, Coquitlam has found other ways to support campaigns of awareness through the lighting of the fountain, which is something that we have that many cities don't have. We're doing it now with the SkyTrain guideways. So we do have options to show support for a number of important causes and awareness issues that I think we're doing, and I think that falls into a city that's accepting, welcoming, and inclusive. So I think that we are and have been doing things, and I think we've been doing those outside of the proclamation policy, and I think that this should be considered in that same realm as well, because I think this is outside. But I am aware of the concerns that where do you start, where do you stop, and that I think is one of the things that you're going to hear other councillors speak on today. And to me, the rainbow crosswalk is all inclusive, and I think that we should do one. Whether we get into doing other things as well as, or whether maybe we do, as I said, the steps instead of. I'm certainly open to all of those ideas, and I certainly would like to hear what my colleagues have to say. And as I said, as the chair said today, this isn't a decision-making forum, but it's a good discussion that's happening, and thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you for presentations. Ian and I have had good talks before in the last election. It's nice to see you again here.
You too.
You're a lively presenter and commentator. Yeah, so you've probably seen my comments on the Vancouver Sun and the Georgia Strait and the Vancouver Province already, so you know where I'm coming from. And that's talking about the concept of true equity. And I cannot see how any particular crosswalk or any other symbol that's celebrating or reinforcing or supporting one particular group or idea can be at the same time also a representative of council and city's commitment to true equity without also opening the door to every other group to have their particular symbol. And so I think there really is a slippery slope. And I think some of that is apparent even in the discussion today, because on one hand we say that it's been asserted that the rainbow crosswalk is all-encompassing. On the other hand, it's been said that it's the pride rainbow, which is probably a little more limited. But then it's also been said, as the mayor pointed out, that even though the rainbow sidewalk is all-encompassing, we would like a second crosswalk of some sort. That led me to think about the protected categories in the BC Human Rights Act. And there's about a dozen protected categories there. And a couple of them are covered by what you've talked about today: sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. But, and I raise this to support my concept about how this would open the door to all the other groups that are
Chair, point of order. Sorry, I don't want to be disrespectful, but are we supposed to be asking questions rather than expressing views? I thought we were just a question period right now.
Did Councillor Hodge ask a question?
No, I think it's okay.
No, I didn't ask either.
No, didn't ask a question. You did ask a question, but okay, that's fine.
My last section wasn't a question either. So.
I just, normally we ask questions, we don't provide our viewpoints.
Okay, thank you.
Go on.
David Davis for the staff.
Thank you very much. So, I want to point out that the BC Human Rights Act also has protected groups include groups defined by race, color, ancestry, place of origin, religion, marital status, family status, physical disability, mental disability, sex. It's not sexual identity, just plain sex, and age. And when we look at all of the different things that are kind of in the public discourse and some of the issues that we deal with, that's not an exclusive list either, because we often hear from various single-issue groups or victim groups or other groups dealing with things like harassment, assault, bullying, mental health, these sorts of things. So I really do think that if we say that this is okay here, as you're suggesting, that we open the door to, I don't see how we could say no to any of dozens of other groups, and I see that as an untenable position. I think this is very similar to our decision not to have proclamations, because one of the reasons that, I think a big reason, my understanding that we don't do that, is that we don't want to take up council time in stuff that's really not the nitty-gritty stuff that city-level government does. And if we open the door to two crosswalks or even one, and then I'm sure that there'll be other groups coming and asking for their symbols, and we'll have to decide about every one of those. I don't think this is what any of us was elected to do. Maybe some of us were. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody. I didn't run on any group like this. I want to any ideas like that. I want to leave you with one story here, and this is in response to Nicholas, one of your first remarks about you were a little afraid to come to Coquitlam. When you came here, you discovered it's actually a wonderful and open and accepting and diverse place. And I was really happy to hear that. And that reminded me of a story about somebody I met a year and a half ago at the Welcome to Coquitlam event, almost 2 years ago, who told me that when he first came here from the Middle East a few years before then, he settled in Vancouver and it didn't feel right. Somebody told him to come to Coquitlam. And he said as soon as he got here, he got on the phone a couple of days after he got here and phoned his family and said, "Family, come here, join me in Coquitlam. I've found Canada." It was a fabulous story. It reinforced the idea that we're doing a lot of things right. We're very accepting. We don't have to wear badges or pins or put billboards up to show that, or even paint crosswalks. We do it. Not symbols, actual action. And we're accomplishing that. You've said so yourself. So I can't support this going forward, but I understand the positive feelings that supporters of this have. I understand where you're coming from. To me, it would just be unfair if we would go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Asmussen?
Well, thank you very much for coming. And, I will agree with your comment in that it is not always a safe place for people of different sexual orientations in this world. In Canada, it's gotten a lot better. North America's got a lot better, but there's a lot of areas where it isn't safe to be and isn't safe to be out. And that's the reality. I have a family member that is gay. But in some places where you live, you want to be in a certain community about that. So I understand the fears and the things and wanting to open it up more. I chair the Multiculturalism Committee of the City of Coquitlam about breaking down barriers between people. But we don't use every group or a symbol to do that. We've done that on a broader scale. I can agree with Councillor Neal that I think that if you go into this, a crosswalk, now it hasn't happened to other areas, but it can happen once you open it up. And if council does approve a rainbow crosswalk, I don't think they can deny you a trans crosswalk. Once you step down that road, you're going to have to keep going down that road. That's my belief. As for the comment about Black Lives Matter, if they came to us and wanted a crosswalk painted for Black, we couldn't not say no. We would have to do it in any other group. I've had a couple of faith groups come to me, one about a single group or one of a multiple groups that are wanting to maybe we should do this. So they come forward. There's other marginalized groups out there. I mean, you talk about mental health. A lot of people commit suicide through mental health, for their schizophrenia, different things, and it's a big problem and it's a big area. But we don't symbolize it in one area, but we deal with it on, I think, a wide area. I mean, diversity is an important thing, and I think, Nicola, sometimes you come to an area with a defense up, okay? Giving a bad reputation, not personally, but a defense is up until you find out differently, right? I'm glad you found out differently about Coquitlam, because we worked hard to include a diverse, but you know what? Not everybody's going to agree. People have the right to agree and disagree, and that will always be the way with any issue here. And freedom of speech has its good points and its bad points, and we can't legislate out or tell people what they have to believe in. So in this one here, to me, I look at, if we're going to put anything on a crosswalk, what I've always liked is just what the CFL has done. Is their slogan is diversity is strength. or respect diversity. If you're to put something down, that speaks to the whole broad range, whether it's ethnic, sexual, or anything. If you want to do some of that, and I know you like to say, and I've been chairing multicultural for a long time, it really is seen as the LGBTQ community's symbol. It's why some people will say it means racism, right? It isn't fully accepted that way or seen as that way. So it is, once again, more importantly, singling out this group for a greater importance over other groups. And why are we going to give one group a greater awareness than all other groups? And so my thing is, we've done a good job in this community. I'm proud of my work, the Multicultural Committee, working on breaking down barriers. And I don't think I tell my committee all the time where hatred or racism comes from is from not talking to people. If you talk to people, you'll just find out that they're people. They're different, but they're people, and you shouldn't hate them or anything. And one of the biggest things, we should be learn to respect people for what they are. But I don't see a crosswalk as achieving the goal. I think we've gone a long ways, and I think we're a good community, an accepting community on many levels. But I do see this as opening the door. Now, it hasn't happened in other cities. Maybe it won't, maybe it will. But I do see, though, and I think, I don't know if you're asking for 4 crosswalks or 1 and 1. I wasn't sure about that point there.
Yeah, we're not asking for any number of crosswalks in particular. We're just asking for a universal symbol of diversity and acceptance, which is what the Rainbow Crosswalk has become.
Yeah, well, but it signifies a certain group. So my worry is...
Can I just insert there as someone... When I hear where we're presenting, we've got people from a community, very fortunate, and we're leaders in our community, I would say. We come forward and we've presented something and say, here's this rainbow, which globally we've accepted as inclusive for everyone. Maybe some people feel that it's not, but when we say some people are going to perceive it as that, and then we don't want to go down a slippery slope, this is where leaders get to come in and say, no, the rainbow is inclusive of everyone. If you don't feel included by that, then I'm sorry, but this is what the symbol we're going for. When I hear substantiating it as for other people, say, oh, other people are going to feel it's just for LGBT people. As LGBT people, that it's very disheartening. Very disheartening. It feels like we're pushing it off to the side. And I don't mean to attack your views on things, but that's just as in a direct response to how that would make people from the LGBT community feel. It feels like we're being compartmentalized again when we're trying to present and just as representatives from this one stripe of the rainbow, just coming forward to say.
All I'm telling you, I'm not making a statement on my own beliefs. I'm just telling what other people have said and what they see it as. That's
the perpetuation that I'm worried about. That's the one that makes us feel excluded. So I'm not, and I know that's your job to bring forward other people's opinions or feelings, and we represent the whole community here. But that's what ultimately makes this community. That's how that makes us feel. So just to bear in mind for when decision making process comes along. This isn't the decision making table. I understand. Just bring that away to think about. That's how. When we're looking at this marginalized community, trying to bring forward something for universality, and we're saying, no, everyone thinks this is not universal, it further compartmentalizes us, that's all.
The idea of the rainbow is essentially to bring everyone together and to make it about everyone. So if there are people within the community that want to say, no, we want to section ourselves off from these people who are different and who are abnormal, that's what we're trying to counter. And that's what the symbol of diversity and acceptance does, is it counters people who say, no, we want to separate ourselves from those weird people over there, right? And that's something that both of us have dealt with growing up, is being sectioned off by the community.
But I guess my other question would be then to this. I'm just saying what the public in parts see it as, okay? You want it for a full diversity, and maybe that's what it should be. I'm just saying what it is. But at the same time, then going back to Mary's, if that's the symbol for all diversity, then to section off yourself as just the trans is...
That's why these are presented in two separate things.
I know, but I'm just saying...
That's why they're supposed to be very different.
I understand your point, but my point goes to that starts... If you go down that road, you can't stop it.
So I'll entertain the option of the trans crosswalk being a slippery slope, because it is singling out one group, and I would say that I'm happy to go down that slippery slope. However, a rainbow crosswalk being a symbol of diversity for everyone, I don't see as being a slippery slope.
And when people in decision making power say that it is or perpetuate the feelings of the public that think that it is not, it further perpetuates the idea that it's not, and we stay further marginalized. That's like, I get that you're representing other people's feelings, but when it comes to the top decision-making power, like when we were deciding on the death punishment for the legal system in Canada, so the public thought this was a great idea, but the people in power knew that it wasn't, and now it's not, and we know that that's not okay. So this is where we get the should, could, would, and saying, no, we know what is right, and now the community will follow knowing what is right. We're just trying to show you that this is what it's supposed to be, and if you perpetuate the other side, it gets harder and harder it just gets kicked further down the road. So.
Well, I'm not trying to perpetuate. I'm just trying to say that.
Well, that's ultimately. I know you're not trying to, but that's what I'm just saying. That's what ultimately happens, right?
But and then sometimes maybe another symbol. The symbol came out of that.
Point of order.
Sorry, it's very tangential. I'm sorry.
It's hard to get into the debate here because
Yeah.
this isn't a forum for that, Madam Chair.
So, and I thank you for clarifying.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, Councillor Morrison, you're next, but Councillor Reid, you still have a question on this?
Just one. Listening to Councillor Asmundson. So I have a question for you. So he brought up a point, diversity, what did you say?
Diversity is strength, or respect and diversity. CFL came up with that, and they pushed that.
So maybe those aren't the right words, but diversity comes up. So if we wanted to recognize your community and everyone else's diversity, that wouldn't be acceptable for you. What happens if I have a little sign or even a rainbow kind of sign that says diversity accepted here, or diversity is our way of life, or something like that? So it wouldn't be your crosswalk. Well, maybe it would be diversity accepted here in a crosswalk instead of all like.
I think that's a great symbol. I think it's a great slogan. I think it's not a great response to a presentation about a crosswalk that is accepting and diverse, because we come up with an idea that is a rainbow crosswalk. We say it's accepting of everyone. It is all about acceptance and diversity, and to say, no, actually, you're different. This is accepting is sort of what I see as a slight issue.
On the note of words, because I do also like the idea of saying diversity, but then if we're going to write words on the side on the crosswalk representing diversity, how many languages do we have going on in Coquitlam? And then we should do them in all. We should do all the languages, which is also a fabulous idea too, right? I mean, like there are a lot. There's further discussion that could be had about that for sure. But it's worth.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. First off, Nicola, Ian, thanks for coming in. Appreciate the insight and the time you took to meet me the other night and chat a little bit about this topic. I'll start out by saying you felt you had a perception coming to Coquitlam that it wasn't accepting, and then when you campaigned, you found out that it was. I'm glad you found that. Doesn't surprise me, but I'm glad you found that. And I think because that's part of what this is about is helping shift perceptions. I think so. That's a really important part. A good friend of mine was active in the business community, and she struggled one night at dinner with a potential client and said, "When do I talk to him about my wife?" And I said, "Why would it matter?" And she said, "Well, what if he doesn't want to do business with me?"
Yeah.
And my exact words were, "Screw him. There's lots of other clients out there." It shouldn't matter. Okay? It still did to her. And she was worried about how it would be received. So I do understand why there's that hesitation that perhaps you sense. So I get it from that perspective. The rainbow saying it's about inclusivity, it's about accepting everybody. I think that might be an objective to get there, where people see the crosswalk as being all inclusive, accepting everybody. I still think there's pockets of people that think it's just the LGBTQ community. I think it's going to take some time to move people beyond understanding it's more than that. It truly is what you're suggesting it is, which is acceptance and inclusivity. So I like to think that we've got a very accepting and inclusive community. But recently I've heard about one of our high schools that has an LGBTQ club that feels the need to relocate their meetings on a regular basis because of how they are treated or how they are perceived to be treated by peers. So that says we've still got a way to go. And I think we do have a way to go. If a symbol such as this helps move us in that direction, I think that's a good thing. So when people say this is a proclamation, I say it's not. This is not a proclamation. This is like so much of what else we can do in our community that says this is who we are. This is what we do. We've got welcome to Coquitlam signs. We say welcome. Do we need to say everyone's welcome? We don't need to say everyone's welcome. It's just seen that way. So this is not a proclamation. It's a clear symbol that we're accepting. We're welcoming. We want people here. It's an all-inclusive community. I believe there isn't a single person around this table, despite what they might feel about a crosswalk, there's not a single person around this table that doesn't want our community to be inclusive and accepting. And so I just look and say, if putting up a symbol like this helps get us there, that's great. I told you the other night when we met, and my thoughts about referring to it as public art. And you made one comment about public art. This is not public art. This is about, again, showing acceptance, showing a welcoming approach and an inclusivity. So for people that suggest let's call it public art and kind of circumvent the concerns, let's do it for what it is, right?
I think you're right on both counts. I think that Gilbert Baker, who designed the Pride flag, I think he was an artist. I think he created a piece of art that was a symbol of diversity and acceptance. And I think I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it's both.
So I love the sentiment, though. Yes. That's the way people. Yes.
So I think we need, again, you've got your work cut out for you, and we've got our work cut out for us is changing the message in what the rainbow means. It's not just the LGBTQ community. So the comments about looking at other options, stairways, or that type of thing, I look and I say from more of a global perspective, there's something that's seen as a symbol and recognized as a symbol. So why do we want to try and recreate the wheel and try to change the way the world looks or thinks? Maybe we can look and say, let's just take this step ourselves and move forward. So I think that's important. Comments about how many, what else, who's next, the slippery slope argument. Well, you know what? The slippery slope argument does have some merit, and that's why I would say no to a trans sidewalk, because I believe if we want to say that this is all inclusive and the rainbow is all inclusive, then I can't say, but this group too needs something more. And I appreciate and was shocked by the stats you gave about the suicide rate. But at the same time, I look and say, if we want to help move the message forward about being fully inclusive, then I can't support a decision about a trans. Councillor Asmussen's comment that no other cities have seen yet the slippery slope. You're right. We do have other things that we can do. I don't know of anybody else out there that has a sidewalk to represent what they do. We light the guideways for various initiatives on the SkyTrain. I think there's ways in which this city has recognized various days, and I fully support that. I think this is a very visible way of saying, welcome, we're accepting, and this is a community that you want to be in. And it helps move the message forward so that maybe when those high school kids come out and take the SkyTrain down to the mall, they become that little bit less concerned about going to their next group meeting and their support and the things they need to feel comfortable. Maybe somebody else can move to Coquitlam and look and not have the perception you had when you first got here. Or the uncertainty. So I absolutely think we can go forward with something. I think it's I would love to see our staff take it away and say, how does this fit into to next year's business plan from a crosswalk perspective as we're updating some of the crosswalks in our town center area? Can we identify one? Can we identify one where we look and say, let's do this and bring back to council a recommendation on where and what the financial implications are. So if my colleagues could see their way clear to supporting something like that, I think that would be a good place for us to go, that staff could at least come back to us with some information. That's my comments. Thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. And I'm actually happy to speak after Councillor Marsden because I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I just want to thank you guys for coming. You're so inspiring, right? To put all the time and effort to fight for something that you believe so strongly, and that's obviously not necessarily accepted. So thank you very much for coming. I think when it comes to a rainbow crosswalk, I agree. It's a universal symbol, but it's known worldwide. It's been around for a lot of years. It's not a new thing, right? It's been around in a lot of areas for a lot of years. If you Google rainbow crosswalks and you understand the significance behind them, usually it's about overall inclusiveness. It's not about LGBT, it's about overall inclusiveness. And if people are still thinking, oh, it's all about LGBT, well, let's be leaders in changing that perception, right? Let's not shy away from this as cowards because we want to avoid controversy. Let's take a leadership role, right? To me, this is about setting the tone for your community. We have all kinds of cultures that don't accept gay people. Let's be leaders. Let's try to change that culture. Let's change those beliefs. If they're residents of Coquitlam, they got to know in Coquitlam we are about inclusivity. To me, it's also even about economic development. I mean, Councillor Marsden talked about, bringing people to the community. Well, for sure, right? Nobody wants to go to a community where they don't think they're going to be accepted. There's so many reasons to do this, and there's so few reasons not to do it, right? We talk about precedents. Well, our staff can phone a number of cities and find out if the floodgates opened with other groups asking for crosswalks. I guarantee you it didn't happen, because if it happened and they said no, that would be way more newsworthy than a rainbow crosswalk would be. So it doesn't happen, as far as I've ever heard. This is very, very frustrating that this is such a big issue on our council. And I'm glad you've come. I'm glad you're creating this conversation. I'm glad that we're moving ahead on this. This is and even if we just focus on the LGBT community, right? Last week I asked a couple of young people who are gay. I said, if we had a crosswalk here, would it make a difference to you? And they said, for sure. And I said, well, how would it make a difference? And they said exactly what you were talking about, right? That they would feel more accepted, that their friends would feel like it's more normal, that they're, some of the people that are bullying and all that sort of thing, it's not the answer, but it's a small piece of the puzzle, right? And again, like I say, there's so many reasons to do it and so few reasons not to do it. It's about changing people's beliefs and becoming more accepted. This is 2017, and it's that this is still an issue in our community is extremely frustrating. And I think we need to take a leadership role. I think we need to do this and show people that we truly care about being as inclusive in all cultures and all sexualities and in every area, because that's what I believe the Rainbow Crosswalk is about. So I really want to thank you guys for doing this and for working so hard, and I hope you're successful in the end.
Thank you.
The economic argument was an interesting one as well. We've got a lot of money, no kids to spend it on. I mean, some of them get, because that's not very inclusive of myself to say that. But I know, and for people who might leave the community because this is so not representative of their values, there's a lot more who will come in their place with more money to spend more freely on local economy. Yes. Very true.
I'm sorry, as a parent, I spend freely.
Too freely.
It's not about money.
It's not about money.
It's not about money.
No, it's not about money. But there's a case that could be made for it. Anyway.
Well, I commend both of you for your leadership and your passion on this issue, and thank you very much for coming in today. We had quite a good discussion about this, and
Your 5 minutes is up.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks so much. Yeah,
Thanks for coming.
lively discussion is really important. Again, really glad that we can have this discussion, that we are having this discussion, that if nothing else, that's really reassuring for a Coquitlam person like myself. Thank you so much for your time.
You sign, just sign.
Next item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our third item is a delegation from Ken Kuhn, who is representing the Tri-Cities Seniors Planning Network. He will be providing an overview of the services and future consultation on seniors issues.
Why reinvent the wheel?
Welcome.
How are you?
Thank you.
Key presentation as well.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Which one we're doing?
That's for.
So, welcome. Nice to be here to represent the Tri-Cities Senior Planning Network. And we're talking today a little bit about trying to have an age-friendly community and just some of the concepts that applies. And so this group started in 2012. And it's a little bit about trying to have Port Moody, Coquitlam, and Port Coquitlam, and Anmore and Belcarra working together and thinking about some of the close to 24% of the seniors that represent the community now, and some of the issues that they are involved in, whether it's transportation, healthcare, housing, and just to try and bring a voice to help you with your discussions when you have something, hopefully that we can help you with some of our point of view, because we do have a fairly good-sized network. So our network is made up of mainly seniors and also seniors caregivers, and they represent the 5 communities in the Tri-Cities. And I guess what we're trying to do when we had a survey, there was certain things that were, key for us, and it was transportation, housing, and healthcare as some of the main issues. And so that's where we've sort of focused, as some of the starting points. So as it says here, it was started in 2012, and so once they did this survey, and I wasn't part of it at that point, so I've been a part of it for the last few years. So they found that housing and social inclusion, transportation, access for the isolated seniors in our community, bridging for new immigrants in our community, lifelong learning, and coordinated services. So trying to see how we can fit that in the Tri-Cities, not just Coquitlam at Glenview and Dogwood, but working as a larger community, how we can work together. So we do have about 300 seniors who have been to our different forums, and you have in front of you a newsletter that goes out to those people. And we also have some representatives who are at our meetings regularly, and some of you have been to our meetings, and I thank you for attending those meetings and hearing what we have to say, etc. And we do have organizations and representatives from CARP and Success and Dogwood, Glen Pine, Wilson Center, Fraser Health, and Dan City, etc. And so we do have business groups that are also focusing in on the seniors. So as it says here, we have a newsletter and we have monthly meetings. And so our first forum that we tried to share this with seniors was a transportation forum. And unfortunately, there weren't any pictures that I could come up with. So this forum was in 2014, and there were, 80 seniors and several vendors, exhibitors there that were focusing in on seniors' activities and needs. And some of this was when the Compass card was coming in, and ICBC was having the re-examination once you hit 80 years old, and so a lot of issues to do with transportation were talked about and discussed at that point. Our next one was a housing forum, and we had Isabel McKenzie speaking there, and she talked about the subsidies for housing for seniors, and it was well attended. We had about 200 people there and several vendors, and we provided lunch for the seniors who attended, etc., and trying to get that discussion going. And Isabel, I'm sure you've heard Isabel many times, was very open to questions and answers, and gave a lot of insight to our seniors who attended. And so that was good, helping us with the seniors and housing. And our latest one was on April 4th, just before the writ was dropped for the election. We wanted to have some seniors issues out there. And it was interesting, and there's the people who were, I think we had 12 of the 14 people who were at the forum who we could ask questions of, etc. There were a couple people who said, well, our political party hasn't developed the political stand yet. And I said, well, that's exactly why we want to have you. We want to know what you personally feel, like what you really stand for. And so I think it went over well. And the previous speaker was also one of the people up on the stage, as you may know.
Excuse me, Ken, I just want to remind you that it was allowed 5 minutes, and you've gone over that by a minute or two now, so I'm going to have to ask you to start wrapping up.
Okay. And we are trying to be at several exhibits, like the Multicultural Seniors Day, and so we try and be inclusive that way. And we've also been at the Van City Caregivers Wellness Expo in Port Moody. So our request is that we would like to have an impact on your policies that affect seniors. If we could have a person who is on your advisory board, or like Terry and Benita and Dennis, who have attended our meetings, just more of a give and take. And so that's really what we're here to hopefully open up the discussion for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for you. Councillor O'Neill?
Yes, thanks. Good to see you again, Ken. Thanks for coming in. And the questions that I have are actually, I think, some that I raised after attending the meeting. You say you want to have a role in advising or consulting with the city. Exactly how is your organization constituted? Are there formal members? Is there an elected executive? And then how are your policies reached? Through resolution of meetings? So I think these are questions that the city would have to have. Mm-hmm. Right now we consult with Dogwood, the Dogwood Board and the Glen Pine Board. There's formal structures there. We know who they represent. I'm not sure I know exactly what your organization is, how it's constituted, who exactly it represents, how it develops its opinions.
Okay. And we're going through the same sort of discussions. Yes, we have an elected executive as far as our policies and procedures and bylaws. We've been struggling through the last several years, trying to have meetings and be inclusive of our members, etc. But that is our main goal for this year, is we need to put some policies and procedures and bylaws into place. So as far as how we make motions and elections and all that, so that has been a concern of ours too, and I'm glad that we had that discussion when you attended too.
Right, yeah, so I think until you get all of your ducks in a row, it'll be difficult for us to, with confidence, ask for your opinions, because we don't exactly know how you reach them and who you're speaking on behalf of and things like that. But it's certainly an area of growing interest in the city. We've recognized that the population of seniors in the city is growing, and that we're looking through our Parks, Rec and Culture master plan. I think we've addressed some senior issues in there as well. Pardon me?
We're doing a senior
strategy.
And we have a senior strategy as well. That's right, as part of our Parks, Rec and Culture master plan. So that's good. But thank you. Continue the good work, and await the resolution, the completion of this important part of your growth. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden?
Thank you. I was just going to start there, perhaps a question for our GM of Parks and Rec. The senior strategy, do you have a timeline for delivery of the draft to council or the final?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair, we did present the draft strategy in May of this year, and at that point, council did endorse the draft, and the direction was to go and consult further with the boards, with the number of groups, including the seniors network, and a number of other interested parties that are impacted by this particular strategy. So we're currently collecting that information, and we'll be returning back with the final strategy to council in the fall of this year. And that is limited to park, recreation, and culture, senior services. This network is very, very valuable, and it's obviously touching on huge areas of service, but we will have our strategy back before council in the fall of this year.
Excellent, thank you. So this group was one of the groups consulted, but thank you very much. I note to Councillor O'Neill's comments with regards to having all the formalities taken care of. I think that I would agree that that's very important, but you're heading down that path, so that works well for us. I do note as well, I'm part of the Tri-City Healthier Communities Committee, which encompasses all of our communities here, and recently in some work that was done to revamp kind of the focus in that, there was some additional parties were invited to the table, and the TCSPN, I believe, is one of the groups that's around the table now and starting to engage in that. So Fraser Health is really the driver behind this to make sure that all the voices are heard. So appreciate what you had to say in terms of where you're going, the information that you've given me already, and if you can take one message back, it's I think from a council perspective, we certainly recognize the need to listen to our seniors and move things forward. So appreciate that.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Lucan.
Our Manager of Communications, Ms. Vincent, would like to say something?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Alueva's comment. In addition to the consultation he mentioned, we do have an online survey that will be distributed from September 26th to October 10th, and there will be the opportunity to provide input onto the draft seniors services strategy via that channel as well.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Reid.
Thank you for this. Being of the proper age group, I get lots of calls on lots of stuff that's going on in here, and some of it is pretty upsetting. Most people around this table know I don't suffer fools lightly, so I usually manage to solve it somehow. Is this somewhat like CARP, only on a more local scale? And where does that all fit in? I had a call a year or two ago from somebody at CARP, which I have never been to one of their meetings, but they were asking me if I would be interested in participating in something, and I just simply got too much on the go right now. But one of the problems we have in our community at some time is having too many organizations trying to all accomplish the same end. So to that, I would ask, are there other groups, and I can see that you're dealing with other groups in here, and this is sort of to be some kind of a sticky thing that puts everybody together, but does not CARP do that, and do they not have a chapter in this area?
Well, CARP is a national organization. We do have a chapter in the area.
Can you just introduce yourself to us, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Bruce Bird. I'm a member of the Tri-Cities Community Association and also a past chair of the CARP chapter.
And also, can someone please explain what CARP stands for?
Canadian Association for Retired Persons.
It's
like
the legal name. It used to be the name. What we call it's no longer an acronym. It's a new vision of aging for Canada.
Oh. So does it have initials now?
No. Not really. I mean, we still call it CARP, but it's it's no longer an acronym.
They've eliminated the periods.
Yeah.
That's an IODE.
But for one reason, CARP fights against ageism. So we can't limit our membership to a certain age. That's ageism. But CARP also participates in the Tri-Cities Community Association. We've jointly sponsored some functions with them. And in terms of anything we do, CARP always tries to work with other groups, not independently. So if there's issues that come up...
The reason for my question, too, just perhaps tell Councillor Towner, you've always heard of AARP in the United States, the American Association of Retired People. One of the things they did, or they do, is they have contracts with health care, with eye care, with insurance, life insurance, all kinds of things, even with driver's insurance, and they have discounts in that for seniors to take advantage of, and other things that help. It's quite helpful. And then I learned when I came up here from someone that there was a CARP, and I didn't really follow it up. Well, they followed up with me a few years ago, but that's it. So I just wondered if this was just trying to duplicate their services, or if this is just something for the Tri-Cities.
No,
it's very good, whatever it is.
It's not duplicating. As I say, we work with other organizations, and as far as the benefits, CARP has a similar set of benefits.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I'd like to add to the comment. My name is Judith Castillo. I am part of the board. And I would like also to mention that it's 3 more members of the board here. And what we really try to do and accomplish is to really offer to the seniors the most advantaged information and a space for them to use the services. What we noticed was happening in our community is so many organizations were doing the same and offering programs sometimes and duplicating services. So through our organization, we're simplifying that for the seniors, and we're focused more on attaining what they need per year. So that is why we create the forums, and we invite all that organizations to be part in our board. So I would like to introduce part of the board members. If you, sure. Please, please to come.
Stand
up. They're being shy, are they?
They're not wanting to.
They can just wave.
Introduce them?
Just introduce them.
Yeah.
Mary. Yeah.
Thank you for coming today.
Yeah. So we are not trying to duplicate any services that are already in place. What we are doing is collaborating with them and facilitate that to the seniors. And what we believe is so important is for all seniors to receive the best of the services, and we need the collaboration of you as a representative of the government in these Tri-Cities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And don't forget, starting September 26th, to get your members to fill out our survey regarding the strategy. Thank you.
We do have a long agenda.
Yeah, I thought you were done.
Okay.
Sorry.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Next item?
can answer.
Item 4 is minutes of the council and committee meeting held on Monday, July 31st. The recommendation is to approve those minutes.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the draft PRC policy for unsolicited P3 proposals.
Move recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Hello.
Hello and welcome back to council after the summer. Nice to see all of you. If you have any questions, just wanted to say Carrie Lohr, who's the author of this report and our manager of policy and partnerships, is she has bronchitis today. She was in early this morning, but I sent her home. She sends her regrets. She's doing fine, but she just couldn't be here to support the report. But otherwise, she would be.
Excellent report.
Okay. Councillor Marsden?
Thank you. I'll concur with Councillor Neal's comment. Excellent report. One question I had on the manual stuff, the question arose when in the letter of intent, should we be expecting them to explain how this aligns with the corporate strategies or the strategic priorities of the city? Is that something they have to explain as part of the letter of intent?
Yes, I think this is an excellent point through the chair. It's alluded to through the material. I don't think we have an outright comment, but because of our master plan and the direction of services and all of our business planning, it would have to be something that's specifically aligned with some of the service areas. We could potentially look at making that more overt in the actual statement of the letter of intent.
That would be the piece that I would think is important. So they, as opposed to alluding to it, it's very clear that they have to be able to connect the dots on how what they want to do is aligned with where our priorities are and the direction we want to go as a city.
That's a great comment. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you. I have one bit of difficulty with this, but I think I expressed it back in whenever we first started this. I'm always concerned and have been for many, many years around here that someone walks into the front counter and says, I'd like to open Disneyland here. Some wonderful little clerk looks up in a book and says, oh, Disneyland isn't in the book, so no, we can't talk to you. And then we have other things that through the years that have come in that have been absolutely nothing that we ever would have wanted to put in our community. And I have difficulty with council not being apprised of this before staff spends time. So when you have a submission or letter of intent or submission of, I'm just looking on page 7 here, and we also have had things before you all came along in the olden days, like 10 years or past. Well, I'm trying to be kind here. It was council members and the mayor that were out usually in those days, and there's still around the region council members and mayors that go out and try and bring industry or businesses or other things into the community. And they aren't something that necessarily go through the staff process right away, but someone will bring one, and one successful one in the last has been Terry Towner's mural. Is it a mural, I would call it?
Oh, the mosaic.
The mosaic. And so that was something that she stumbled across, and she brought it to council, and with a sort of, well, guys, what do you think? And then we all sort of said, yeah, well, we got to get staff to look into it. So I like that part. I like that part where any one of us and any staff member here can come up and say, hey, somebody came in and asked me if we'd like to open a duck pond in front of City Hall, and they come in and, hey, what do you think? Before staff asks for the letter of intent and does an evaluation and looks at the value for money, and we waste all that time, and then you gauge if we like it or not. I sort of want to be in on the do we like it or not, because it may be something that sounds like a great idea, may not be politically correct, or for 1,000 reasons we may not want to do it. And I would like to see that moved up. I'd just like to see council notified. That's basically it. Before we spend staff time, before we indicate to somebody that, you know, oh yeah, it sounds like a good idea when it may not be acceptable. So I'm having trouble with where step 4 is.
Okay.
I don't think it has to be I don't want to see a full bore. It's just somebody wants to build a duck pond. That's good enough for me.
If I can respond,
That's my comment.
it is a comment, and to be fair, I think you've raised the issue of making sure we're open. Staff are always open to ideas. You've raised that before, and I assure you, this is a balance. We always want to be open for partnering proposals that have value for the city. At the same time, we want proponents to understand that it's a fair and equitable and transparent process that is going to be open to kind of the rigors of that. I think.
Shouldn't you be sure that council, it's something
Yes.
that council would sort of
Yes.
even entertain a
Of
thought
course.
about?
Of
Because
course.
what if I get somebody who wants to come and build a bell
Yes.
tower here for the
Yes.
evergreen? I mean, I want to bring that back to council and say, hey, guess what? Are you guys interested? I can see Terry or Brent may say, what does staff say? And I'll say, I don't know, but if you're that interested that we want staff to spend time on it, then let's do it.
And I think this policy wouldn't preclude an idea coming from council or council members or someone writing a letter saying, I'm interested in this. This would not preclude that. What this simply does is states the overall intent that, and you have to remember, we have various degrees of proposal seriousness. There's times when someone just comes up with an idea and we can pretty much say, you know what, that's kind of crazy. In other cases, we say, well, that's a pretty good idea, give us more information, and they may actually not even be able to give us enough information to share with council. So there's all degrees of levels of information and seriousness of proposals. I think to answer your question, we can build language into this policy that allows kind of the more complicated or more technically challenging ideas to make sure they're vetted before council, before a whole bunch of work is done, and also include language in here that opens the opportunities for council to discuss an idea well in advance of any technical review. Like, we can have some of that language in there to make sure that all ideas can be presented, all ideas can have a discussion here if necessary, and we also don't want anybody making a whole bunch of technical work and effort before coming to council, which I think is kind of your
Well, a
main
letter
concern.
of intent can be a very scary thing to someone who just has a brilliant idea but doesn't know how to follow through
Right.
on it. So
And in some cases, those can be generally brief. Like, again, I think when you see a letter of intent, you might think in some cases it can be a two-page letter with very general, high-level information, and we just present that to council.
unless staff wants some great long 4-page
Well,
thing, and that's what I want to avoid.
Yes, I totally understand your
Okay.
perspective.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question, and then Councillor Hodge and Wilson are next. But I couldn't help but read this and think that there's some parallels here with the Rainbow Crosswalk. It's unsolicited. It's not on our work plan. It's come to us.
Yeah, and generally, I think for us, this tends to be an idea of how to deliver park recreation and cultural services or initiatives that we have in our business plan or might be aligned with the services we provide. There's always parallels like this. I can see where you're looking at it. For us, it would be. I'm going to give you an example of things we get, like another covered sports facility is one example. We've had quite a number of them of various types. We've had proposals for kind of recreational park type facilities in our large parks. We've had proposals for various types of private services on city land, like. Not just indoor sports, but indoor type of recreation. So generally, it's covering the areas of recreation and park type of services, even cultural type of stuff. And we generally are not approached with these. The Rainbow Crosswalk is really not something we've dealt with in the past directly in Parks and Rec, and wouldn't be exclusive to this, but in my mind, it'd be outside of the scope of what we would do. That'd be more of a corporate issue.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, so today we're not being asked to approve this procedure. Is there a policy or procedure manual? Is it going to come back to us?
Yes.
Okay,
Just to receive feedback from council, and then we'll draft and bring it back.
So my comments are certainly along the same line as Councillor Reid. I believe that we do need a fair, objective, transparent procedure to evaluate them. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve here. I do also want to make sure that this does not become perceived as a barrier. And I would like to see council notified early, because most of these type of requests are going to come from the community. And I don't think we can just sort of treat this the same way we would treat something coming into, say, the planning department, where there's a lot of technical work and then it comes to us for final approval. I think there's an expectation by the community that council will know, and if we don't, we're going to hear about it through the back door anyway, partway through the process. And given, I think the only two I can recall were community groups wanting to build something. And that's why I think, for their sake, and I know there's going to be one or two coming in the future, to know what the process is, I think is important, and it helps them as well. But I think that we as a council, I think, want to know, hey, this is what's brewing and what's coming.
Okay.
I also think that given that we've only had about 2 of these in the last 5 years, and maybe there were more that never made it here, but 2 that I can think of, and given that these requests tend to come from community groups, I don't, as I said, want to see anything that could be perceived as barriers, including application fees. Because I don't think we're going to get a lot of them. And I think through this process, they're going to have to do a proper business plan. Before any decision is made, they're going to have to go out, and that means probably hiring somebody or doing some work. So I think that becomes cost enough and becomes enough of a weeding out the sort of the I'm going to fly this kite and see if it goes versus the serious proposal. So I think there's enough in the procedure. So in summary, I think that between step 1 and step 2, it needs to be gauging council support, and I think that we have to not put in application fees.
Okay.
Other than that, I think it's a good initiative. I think it's going to be helpful for people making applications, coming forward with ideas, and helpful for council.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
I agree with Craig in terms of the application fee, but if we should get to a point where we're entertaining a lot of these, well, then maybe we'll come back. The step 7, public notification or the initiation of an RFP, and then in the report it talked, or in the policies it talked about when you would ask for an RFP if a proposal like this had come multiple times. But I would hope that we would also maybe entertain an RFP process, even if we didn't get a number of proposals over time, just to continue to make it open and transparent, because, somebody's got a good idea out there, and they come to us. There might be others that...
That is absolutely correct. If I can, that's a really important part of this, because someone has an idea, others may have already come ahead of them and they've already explored. Just because that person has an idea could be slightly formatted differently. It doesn't give them exclusive right to that. We still have to do an open and transparent bid process for that service at some point. That individual or that company may have some really good ideas they can put into their bid, but it would still have to be an open and transparent process. And that's been a big, important part with the ones we receive. There's some perception that they come forward with an idea to partner with the city and they're going to have exclusive rights. And that's we've tried to dispel that issue, and that's a very important component. I agree with you, and through that process, we're going to get value for money. We're going to get, a real, synthesis of the benefits of the proposal, what a proponent may specifically bring to the table. So that's really an important process for us.
So then, would step 7 not include public notification, just go initiation of our...
It could. It could. I'll take some notes here that...
There might be times where it doesn't make sense, but it would seem to be more often it would probably make sense to go to an RFP.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. So we've had... offers before of Parks and Rec equipment and that sort of stuff, and sometimes they are solicited, as Mayor said, they aren't unsolicited. They're us reaching out and saying, come on, we need ping pong tables or a wheelchair accessible playground or whatever. I looked at 5.1 in the policy, that's on page 2 of the policy, and it identifies the kinds of things the project will provide tangible benefits, which might include these 3 things: access, or innovative new programs, or reduced cost. It doesn't include public art. It doesn't include elements of monument or historical recognition or that sort of stuff. And I assume that we would, public art, we just come back from Ottawa, and those of us who were there saw public art in every park. And we don't have that element of public art in most of our parks. We do have some in Blue Mountain, a little bit in Mac, and a bit in Mundy, a bit in Town Centre, but and Spirit Square. But I wonder if, did we mean to exclude public art, or do we or should there be a bullet that says public art, monuments, those sorts of things?
I don't think we intended to exclude it. I think public art is an important component of our overall service. I think it's one of the service areas. I think it was a matter of not being able to include other potential cultural benefits that something may provide. If council felt it important, we could add some more in there, including public art. It was simply that we probably couldn't include any other potential. If it's aligned with our public art program, if it gives us value for money, if we had intended to partner with others, if we had included a desire to include public art in a certain park, for instance, and they came forward, clearly it would be aligned with the master plan and the service wheel and the service initiative. I am tacking with a number of council members thinking that we don't want to be closed just because it's not overly stated in here. We would never close somebody off to, if they want to do a specific public art project in a park, even if it wasn't designated and it was a really interesting initiative. We would probably just give it to council some information so they knew what was presented. We can include general language in the policy that talks broadly about some of these things if that would be helpful to council. It was not intended to exclude. Largely we get more proposals for the larger service-driven initiatives, but we could be more overt if council feels that would be more helpful.
Well, I assume that would be your answer. So I do prefer the idea that we're a little bit more inclusive,
yes.
more overt in stating that public art and historical monuments and the kinds of things the Legion might want to propose or whatever would be included in the survey.
Okay. Thank you. I made a note.
Councillor Asmussen.
I like the report. I will agree. I think we want to be able to monitor and track. I don't think we need an application fee right now. We want people. I look at this. I look part about art. I understand some parts, but I think this is talking about P3 proposals that are more of a corporate financial benefit. I think what we're talking about, and maybe that needs to be highlighted in this policy. And we can look under the gifting and something else for the park and stuff like that. So I think there may be some tweaking you may want to do in that. But I do think, we gave a group recently some money to buy tables and chairs without a business plan, and we don't know how to track the success of that. And I think council struggled that time because there was no business plan. And I think the important thing now is to realize from those type of decisions that we need business plans. The idea, and I think it's good, I don't want to over micromanage. I think if there's some issues that are important that staff says, we better flag staff on this. I look at this just not as being the groups in the community wanting to build other types of facilities where it's storage or whether it's different facilities. It also comes down to our parks and people wanting to sell things in our parks and do different parts of things like that in our parks, or some people wanting to do like the sand pits and stuff, like how they do that and how we work that out. So that's what I see this policy as dealing with on those policies and those areas of it. But I really do like how this is laid it out. I think I want to make sure that it's not over bureaucratic. I think we want to be very helpful to the people. We want to explain to them up front that, on that initial letter of intent, that we're just looking for a basic outline of what you're talking about. We want to get an understanding if it's something we'll accept, and then we'll push back on you for more stuff. But it should go through that process first. And I guess sometimes we always worry we create policies which are good in intent, that they become overly detail-oriented and bureaucratic. So I just want to make sure that within this policy that we're looking to facilitate and help guide the people through the policy also and what they have to do, and being understanding. So a lot of these people aren't true business people, so we may have to help them know where they have to resource materials that they need to put together, or who they recommend to help put together a business plan of some sort. But I like the policy. I think it's long overdue, and I think it's going to help us at the city attract more P3 proposals. I think will be beneficial for the city in the long run. Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thanks. Actually, just in response to the Mayor's comments, it's too bad he left. So this was 5.1 on page 2 of the policy procedure manual. I guess it can't hurt if we specify public art, but I think public art is well covered in bullet number 2. And actually, bullet number 3 just about covers everything. Because really, we're not going to be getting into anything that's going to... as long as we're getting something out of a P3 and not having to pay for even a part of it, that is reduced residential tax impact. So I think that's really like the main driver here, is it not? Like we'll get more services, we'll get or another facility or amenity, but it's stuff that we don't have to completely pay for ourselves by asking our taxpayers to do it. So the reduced resident tax impact actually that's a big envelope there. Just about everything goes into it. And certainly bullet number 2, programs and service, that would cover public art, but I don't mind having public art specified. I don't think it's really necessary.
If I can, I'm happy to specify it. I think what I'm getting from a number of council members is that there may be something that is presented that may add something that we may not have thought of. And that it might still be aligned with things that we wanted to do with our strategies or goals. Just because we haven't thought of it, we wouldn't say no to it. And if it adds value, I'll think about that and I'll include that as an adjustment to the policy. Because it's very important that we're open. And I think there's some very good comments from a number of council members, including Councillor Asmussen, that the policy needs to be overtly talking about being facilitative and attracting proposals and not an obstacle. I'm certainly, that was the goal. If there's still a little bit of concern, we'll make sure that the language is adjusted. The idea is to bring in partners that have other objectives for us, that we can get optimal public value. So anyway, just to clarify that point, Councillor O'Neill, sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. No, I'm finished.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Great.
Was it moved and seconded?
Yes, it was.
Yep.
Yes, it was.
Thank you for your
All in
comments.
favor?
Thank you.
Anyone opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next item?
Item 6 is the semi-annual Economic Development Activity Report from January to June 2017. We have introductory comments by the Deputy City Manager and a presentation by the Manager of Economic Development.
Move receipt. Second.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Hodge. Welcome.
Thank you very much. As stated, this is the semi-annual Economic Development Update Report. We're seeing a strengthening of the national and provincial economy. GDP is currently estimated at about 2.7% increase for 2017. This has led to a couple recent interest rate increases by the Bank of Canada, which will have some impact on the local lending rates. Already has had some impact. Development continues to be strong in Coquitlam. The construction values for the first half of this year are lower than the first half of 2016, but we largely believe that's just a timing issue. The construction values are recorded when permits are issued. We have a lot of development applications in our system, so we believe that construction activity will be strong throughout the rest of 2017, and it'll be another very good year for Coquitlam. We have both David and Eric here to answer questions that the committee may have, and so we're at the pleasure of the committee. David's attached a presentation to the report, and he can either run through it or we can simply move to questions at this time.
Who took the picture?
I don't know. I can find out for you.
It's beautiful.
picture. It's a great picture.
It's beautiful picture.
Yeah, I think it was done with Kathleen's team.
Of course it was.
Looks like a drone shot. My son would say an illegal drone shot.
Thank you, Mr. Dumont.
To get that high, it's an illegal drone shot.
Did you want to?
Council's discretion.
The presentation.
No,
I've read through it.
Yeah, read it. Don't need the presentation.
No to the presentation? Okay, straight to questions then.
Perfect, thank you.
So, Councillor Hodge. And then you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a good presentation. I read through it, some good information there. I was particularly interested in the comments here and about the filming and the revenue from film, given what's happening with the Canadian dollar versus the American dollar, given that we're hearing more about filming up in the area. And I was actually was at Tree Fest yesterday in Riverview and was surprised, and I couldn't believe the activity there as I went through the grounds. The areas are all blocked off, and I understand there were actually 4 films being filmed there in the same week, and that their filming, I think, was up 50% this year, they were saying. And what I didn't know, and I found this interesting, is they told me that outside of a film studio, Riverview is the most filmed location in North America. And I had no idea that more films, if you don't count the film studios and some of the things, that there's more filming takes place in Riverview than anywhere else in North America. I thought, that's amazing. That's right here in Coquitlam. And I'm just wondering, how we leverage that. I mean, certainly we want film industry taking place, but they come in, they rent the stuff, they bring onto site, and I'm just looking, is there potential to do like what Langley just did, given we have this mecca of filming right in the community? How do we sort of leverage that in terms of creating permanent jobs that don't move in and out with the film?
Through the chair to Councillor Hodge, yes, exactly. One of the priorities in our film strategy, which we just adopted in February, was to leverage, one of the action items was to leverage the Riverview lands and generate more economic impact through film, but also potentially through such as a film studio. We actually do have our first film studio that opened up. It's just been sold, but the original name was Crossing Studios, and so that's a pretty big company that's head offices in Burnaby, but they have film studios throughout the Lower Mainland. So this would be, I think, their 8th location. So it is something for sure that we're concentrating on, as well as working on our marketing materials to promote the fact that we actually do mention in our marketing materials that Riverview is the most one of the most sought after sites in North America outside of film studios, and we're also trying to connect the dots, so to speak, in the sense where providing connections to local businesses that provide services that whether it be catering services or film set construction, so we can get that economic impact. And then the other part of what our film liaison just does is trying to capitalize on getting additional shoots. So, for example, Production A may come to Coquitlam to film at Riverview, but they want to do a street scene or a park scene. And so when she's dealing with the location scouts, she lets them know of the options that we have. So 100% agree with you, because there is some opportunity for us to grow that sector. Canadian dollar is appreciating a little bit, which impacts us a little bit, but it's still the overall difference for the film sector overall is we're getting recognized more for the talent that we have up here in a variety of professions that would impact the film sector. So whereas in the past, production and stuff was typically sent back to Los Angeles. So things are changing.
Yeah, and the other thing I learned that I didn't know was that in some cases, film companies have made major investments within the buildings, that there's a couple that are buildings that now have permanent sets, that they just come in and they need a hospital scene, they just come in and dress this, the hospital ward is built and ready to go, as opposed to just sort of temporary 2-week film sets. So I had no idea that we were actually starting to see some of that development on the ground. So that was certainly interesting and bodes well for future filming. And I had one other question, which was on the tourism. And I know that when we moved the tourism over to Mackin House, and that was in your stats here, sort of March to June, I'd be very curious to know if the numbers certainly in that period went up, but when we're finished the next quarter, knowing that how that location worked for us, if we saw the numbers of visits go up because of the proximity to freeway and other things. So I don't know if you have those numbers now, but I'd certainly be interested.
Through Chair, Councillor Hodge, I'll just get Eric to maybe comment just in general what's transpired over the summer months.
Thank you. Through the chair, they've done a tremendous job down there. They've opened up the rail station, if you didn't know, to service visitors Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. They have the visitor center staff in period costumes. So I think when a visitor shows up, and a resident, to be honest with you, to that area, and they're giving tours of the caboose, which was never done before. So it's Kandrina and her team at the Coquitlam Heritage Society has done a fantastic job, and I'm going to follow up with her now that the busy summer season's over to see how it went through July and August. But by all accounts, she was very happy. I think we were very happy to have them as a resource to service visitors that close to the hub. And I think now with the changes with the Port Man and the tolling, we may see even more rolling through there. And people, a lot of people did go in there to ask about how they pay their tolls. So it could be a double-edged sword, but there could be more people coming over that way and stopping in for information on Coquitlam in the area.
I just thought it was fantastic, and the fact that they're doing the period costing, that goes back to the old, what we were doing back, the tourism booths of the 80s and 90s, where we were launching that beautiful BC and those tourism programs to have people in period costume greeting visitors. I think was really cool.
They got really creative, and that was on them. We said, before we come to an agreement, what are some of your ideas? And their team came up with some fantastic ideas, and the period costumes I found out about a little later, and I thought, wow, how cool is that to show up there and have that interaction with some students over the summer and the staff down there. So I think it's great.
Mr. Monroe?
Thank you, Terry. Just to follow up, I think it's been very good for us to have the balance of the two locations and expanding the role closer to the highway, definitely. And not only the highway, you got to remember that's our major retail corridor through there as well. So I think it's they've really gone above and beyond, and I think for us, we'll continue to work with them to grow that. But the other big factor, I think that I know it's only one day, but we also had tourism coverage, visitor information center coverage, I should say, on Saturdays, which we haven't had for a very long time. So that's a good addition.
Good. That was my questions. Thank you.
Councilor O'Neill.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think one of the more important parts of this report is the Business Retention Expansion Activities Report. I think it's kind of the key of what you do, and I'm glad to see that you're making lots of contacts. And so generally, I'd like a summation from you about the feeling you're getting from the businesses you're talking to that you're trying to keep here, and the businesses you're trying to get. How's our reputation growing or diminishing?
Through the Chair, Councilor Neal, good question. I think overall, our reputation as a business-friendly community has really grown over the last, I would say, 10-year period. So we're getting some good recognition, not only, and where I can put the emphasis on that is hearing it from the businesses, but also the real estate community. And so we are, we've changed the game, so to speak, when it comes to working with the businesses that are looking at attracting here. Now, on the retail side, there's opportunities for space. Where we find that we're a little more challenging is on the industrial side, because we have a vacancy of 1.9%. So we do have businesses sometimes that want to be here that, unfortunately, we can't accommodate.
Have you heard anything about the, I guess now defunct building that's right beside the Highway Number 1 at the west end of the Fort Mann Bridge, where there used to be the tolling center? There's going to be a lot of office space open there, I would think. No? Oh. Okay, good. Well, the city's going to move in there.
It's fully occupied.
It's fully occupied by tolling people.
No.
Oh, okay, well, let's if you can say that.
Through the Chair, maybe Mayor Stu can help out as well, but there's also the Ministry of Transportation was also in that in location as well.
It's primarily a ministry building.
Oh, okay. I thought it was always...
Yeah, I was in it.
I was always, the understanding was this big tolling data center, but it's not just that. Okay.
So that's, and in general, when we have, on the positive, when we have a building come available, it usually is got a lineup of people, specifically on the industrial side, to get filled. Locally, on the business retention and expansion side, we see a lot of work. Kudos to my team for getting out there and meeting with the businesses, and a lot of that's with Eric, but getting responsive and trying to connect the dots and trying to help them to grow. And I think over time there's been more, all the infrastructure investments in the Evergreen Line, there's a lot of things that are coming online, office space developing in different corridors that are making people feel pretty positive about our local business environment. So most of the stuff we hear is very positive.
That's good to hear. I've got a question and comment about the tourism program aspect as well. Reading this was the first time that I'd heard, or at least registered, about our partnership with the Scenic 7, a group that promotes attractions and businesses along the Lougheed Highway from Coquitlam to Hope. That's in the middle of page 7. And I looked up their website, scenic7bc.com, and they've got Coquitlam highlighted on that map. They've got Coquitlam pull-down stuff. And so when did that happen?
So through the Chair, Councillor O'Neill, what I've done is I've joined a couple, the way Destination BC is working now is they want communities to work together in order to get what's called cooperative marketing. So every community along the way puts in, let's say $100, and collectively Destination BC will match that. So Coquitlam was asked to join the Scenic 7 when I first started in around 2014. And they were well established. It was kind of hope to maybe into Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, and they kind of wanted us, Eric, do you have some money and can you become a part of this? So this one's come a long way. I'm going Friday actually out to Mission to meet with the group, and we're launching a brand new website that was partly funded by our program, and Destination BC, and we're really going to start pushing the idea of traveling for those who don't know, Scenic 7 is Highway 7. Yeah, Low-Heat Highway, and we're pushing it as an alternative to Highway 1, a little slower,
more scenic.
Stopping at the businesses, it's more scenic, you from Riverview to Town Center Park, and really letting people explore locally as day trips or overnight trips, and you'll see a lot more. It's been kind of quiet, Councillor O'Neill, because there's been a lot of backroom work up until, I'd say, within the next month. You'll see a big launch of the website, and it looks fantastic. And another one that I'm working on as well is called westcoastfood.ca, and that's another partnership that I've put in some of my budget and reap the rewards of a much larger cooperative marketing. The West Coast Food promotes our restaurant scene, our food scene, our beverage scene now that we have Mariner, throughout the Lower Mainland and a little bit into Bellingham and to Seattle. So again, something I could never do on my own with my budget, but leveraging it that way. So it's two really good initiatives.
Not a major expenditure.
Not a major expenditure.
It's leveraged by Destination BC and everything.
Absolutely.
So I looked on the scenic7bc.com website, and it's a pretty good little website right now anyway. I pulled down Coquitlam, and one of the first things I saw was an event that actually isn't on our calendars. And this is an event that I think Councillor Towner would absolutely love.
Yes,
it takes place at 9 a.m. September 23rd at Town Center Park. It's one of these color runs where you run around and get that thrown different. You run through different clouds of powder and dust that colors you. It's 5K, and ends with a dance party and a color throw. So there you go.
Coming to Coquitlam?
It's here on September 23rd.
Couple Saturdays
so
from
there
now.
we go. I got it.
Our friends in Parks.
I thought you should know.
Approved it.
I've done it with my kids at UBC.
There you go.
Yeah,
so there's one here in just a couple of weeks. And you can register online here.
Coquitlam.ca/explore. You'll find all the information.
That's right.
Thank you for that, Councillor O'Neill.
You're most welcome.
The mayor can't make that one, so you'll have to do it.
Another question. So,
Homie don't run.
We've talked. I say individually, I might have talked to, or you might have heard from a lot of councillors about celebrating the French Fact through a special couple of pages on our website or something like that. Now, I don't know if that's your project or that's communications project. Is that going to be part of the new tourism website? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Through the chair, Councillor O'Neill, you bet. As you may have noticed in the report, one of the things we did this spring was have an RFP out for a branding and a website. So what we want to do is take a lot of that information and allow us to get much more creative. Coquitlam.ca is the municipal site, and there's only so much you can do. I'll go there to check when my garbage is getting picked up and the next swim lesson is. What we want to do is take it off and have a Tourism Coquitlam website, and then we can have Francophone information. We can have the color vibe coming up. We can have top 5 places for St. Patrick's Day, and we're going to be able to get a lot more creative in what we do, and absolutely it'll give us much more real estate to work with than we currently have.
And specifically, that's where we're going to find celebration of French history, culture, heritage. There, is that part of the plan? There?
Correct.
That's where it's going to be.
Correct.
Good. Okay, I didn't know where that was going to land.
Yeah, and so
kind of waiting for it.
we're working with our Kathleen and her team for sure on stuff like that, and the Heritage Society, and make sure that it's an inclusive. As we go along, we're not making this stuff up on our own, and it's writing and getting images and all this other stuff that's required for the web.
Good. Thank you very much. Great report. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Stewart?
Thank you. So on the movie scene, on the filming scene at Riverview in particular, but elsewhere, I note that we have some really big feature films. I won't name them because I know they're kind of get uncomfortable sometimes with the number of people that might show up. But tremendous investments in facilities and purpose-built short-term buildings that they put up and will subsequently take down. Does the city do you know if the city has any involvement at all in the approvals of that sort of stuff, or is it simply temporary buildings and therefore not subject to permit?
I would maybe have to defer to Mr. McIntyre, but I assume any construction that sets would have to abide by our building permit regulations.
Right. Good afternoon, through the chair. Great question. I'm stumped. I don't believe so. I'd have to check with building permit staff, but I think if it's for structures that are not to be habitable, if it's part of a production that's on a temporary basis, I don't believe that would be subject to the code.
I assumed not, because they don't meet code. Obviously, they don't have a concrete foundation or anything. So,
but that wouldn't preclude them. Other safety issues like the public safety authority, electrical certainly would be work safe requirements. Obviously, would be necessary to be followed as well.
No, fair enough. I wasn't suggesting that we try to implicate the building department in that kind of work, but that if we were involved, that at least we fast track, because there's no question that there's investments going on site and skilled labor going on site that is enormous for what will ultimately be 2 or 3 days of filming, and then it will all be dismantled and the site will be returned to its, the wrought iron gates and these gargoyles will be removed, and it's quite an amazing process. On the economic development, I did want to respond to Councillor O'Neill's thing, because I did inquire on that particular question. I'd never managed to make it into what we call the TRIO building, but which is actually the Ministry of Transportation's Provincial Operations Center. And TRIO is a small tenant of it. I have been in the TransLink version of the TRIO tolling center, which is about 6 people in Maple Ridge in a small office building. I would say their total footprint is the size of the committee room, and they run the similar tolling for Golden Ears Bridge. And primarily the staff are there to try to figure out if the guy that's trying to cover his motorcycle license plate with one hand, if he, that sort of stuff. And they're really creative, trying to avoid the tolls. But I believe that 90% of the building, or something like that, remains fully occupied, including the new wildlife detection systems. I don't know if those storyboards are still out in the lobby. I don't think they are, but last week was the engineering awards that included the wildlife detection system that's been installed on several highways and is centrally monitored by Coquitlam staff that are occupied in the Coquitlam building, that monitor all of the detection systems that alert motorists to the fact that a herd of deer is up ahead, or there's wildlife crossing the bridge and all that stuff. So it's really quite a neat technology that's right here in Coquitlam and will remain in Coquitlam despite the fact that it doesn't collect any revenue anymore.
Oh, that's good enough. Thanks. Good information.
Councilor Marsden?
Great, thanks. Good report, guys. Appreciate it. I've spoken in the past about the importance of trying to identify ways where we can support our local businesses by introducing them to purchasing opportunities that the city might have on a more proactive. And at the Mayor's Barbecue just recently by the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce, the question was asked, what are you doing as a city to help that? And like Mayor Moore in Port Coquitlam talked about a process they have, a proactive outreach when they've got a purchasing opportunity. They scrub their business license database and then they send out the information, because not everybody looks at BC Bid or looking at the city website, so they're more proactive with it. I know as part of your business plan this year, you talked about doing some more work with data mining and some work with gathering information from businesses for the business licensing. Can you give us an update on where you're at with that project? I know you're working on it in conjunction with, I believe, legal.
Yes.
If you can give an update of what you might be able to share.
Perfect. Thank you. Through the chair to Councilor Marsden. So yes, we're currently working on phase 1 with business licensing, and essentially what we did was probably about a year ago, we kind of looked at the information we were collecting from business licensing and where we could identify some improvements to gather more information, because there is essentially a data shortage for information on our business community, and that's no different than most communities. So it's gone very, very well. Since that time, business licensing hired the business licensing liaison person, and Aaron's doing a great job there, and being able to help fill some of the gaps that economic development and legal services identified. And so, I mean, what we're trying to get is get to the point, and there's still ongoing work, but getting to the point where we'd be able to tell you in the future where X amount of businesses are in the Austin Heights corridor, X amount of businesses are in Maillardville, and they employ this many people. So we're working towards those goals, and we just started again. The individual was just hired a few months ago, so I think the progress is good, but there isn't a whole lot I can report back at this moment in time.
Okay, fine. That's fine. Appreciate that. I'd encourage you to perhaps reach out to Port Coquitlam and find out what they are doing. Again, I will look and say it's up to each business to identify the opportunities and sell their products and that. But if there's something that they've got, some information that they're gathering, and they're able to electronically make their businesses aware of opportunities, I think that's something that is a differentiator in terms of opportunity for local business. And when you go to attract business or retain business, you're able to say, here's some of the things that we're doing for you. So again, if it's there already, and we're able to piggyback on that or utilize it, I think there's value. A lot of people talk about shopping local. Some talk about it and don't always execute it, but I think it's a matter of identifying the opportunities and making sure that we move forward.
Just a quick response, if I may, through the chair, to Councillor Marsden. That's one of the things that manager purchasing we've been working with for a long time. Our finance department's always been very open to working with local businesses, and so when we're out and about, and if we hear businesses that are interested in what could be anything from supplying tires to accounting services, we always connect them to purchasing and encourage them to send marketing packages in so that we can forward it through to the correct divisions or the persons that would be making those decisions. So, but that said, happy to talk to our colleagues in Port Coquitlam to see if there's some other things that we may do.
Great, thank you very much.
Mr. McIntyre?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, to back up Dave here, he was mentioning greater coordination and cooperation between legal services, business licensing, and economic development. But actually, it's the whole main floor area. We share the same workspace, but we also share a number of objectives. And so there's been a group that's been kicked off. This is Stephanie James on the business licensing side, but reaching out to economic development. And certain areas in planning, building permits for one, sign permits, development planning. So we're just getting into those discussions now. So again, we're trying to take a more coordinated, communicative approach around that, recognizing sometimes the issues do come up and how we can deal with that, but to work much better together as a team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Anything else, Councillor Marsden?
I'm good, thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. On page 5, you mentioned that the visitor center operations and the chamber, that they would sort of share the tourism duties for this year. So when I look back to attachment 3, they both seem to have attracted the same number of walk-in visitors, which I find curious, being that I don't know who would drive to Lansdowne and go up 2 floors, except that when I go into a town and I don't know where stuff is, the chamber is the first person I phone, so I get all that. But I'm just wondering, did the visitor center in Maillardville, did they hire students for this year?
Through the chair, Councillor Mead, that's correct. They do. They ramp up their staffing for summer, and come September, the students will go back to school.
Okay, and it seems that they had lots of fun doing what they did and did a great job of it. So when you look at the numbers between the chamber and the telephone inquiries I get, that makes sense. And the number of travel guides distributed there's quite a disparity there, but I would assume that they probably sent a lot of their guides out to their local businesses too, wouldn't they? So that explained that for me. And the maps and brochures, maybe they sent them out as well. So my question is this. And listening to you earlier today discuss with someone about what we've done for the Millardville area, now that SkyTrain's here and sort of built, do you think it's possible? I mean, I don't know how much of this money the Chamber is going to retain, but do you think it's possible that at one station or another they could put a visitor kiosk? Either here across from us or at the main center and have an actual kiosk? Or you're smiling at me, aren't you?
Through the chair, Councillor Reid, you're brilliant. Yes.
No. Point of order.
He said you're brilliant.
That's why we always got along. Anyway, we're actually over the summer, this fine gentleman and myself, we did some work on looking at some projects that we could do over and above what we normally do. And so there'll be a report coming forward to council in the near future. And one of the things that we looked at was digital kiosks. And so we could put maybe 3 or 4 throughout the community, maybe one on Evergreen Line, maybe one, I don't know, at other locations that would be high traffic.
Yeah,
so,
I like that, because then the Chamber can get a little more involved. Ask Kevin, the people from Millardville.
Anything one?
Yeah. Through the chair, just to, again, I was looking at these numbers as well between the Chamber and and I had to do a double take. And the Coquitlam Heritage Society got up and running a little later than the Chamber, but I do also think the Chamber walk-in visitors are businesses walking in and business representatives and I don't think when you compare apples to apples, I'm almost certain, given location, it's visitors that are...
They're sort of like bananas, yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
But we'll take the promotion.
Yeah.
So that's my one point. The other point is in the spring of this year, I did a driving trip with a bunch of folks. And one of the things when we'd stop at a visitor info thing, the local folks in some of the smaller towns had lots of coupons you could take for dinners and coffees and, get a free muffin with your coffee or get a free donut with your dinner or something like that. And I thought it was kind of an interesting thing to have at the visitor centers in case people were going to take advantage of it. And on an entirely different thing, just for information, I was at a function with a bunch of marketing folks, and they were saying that the trend now is, because the marketing folks and event people do most of their business by technology of some sort, a lot of them now aren't increasing office space, but indeed letting people just work from home. And I'm wondering if you've heard this, and we don't have any big marketing places in Coquitlam anyhow. I mean, not that big. So we're not losing. So what's your comment on that?
Through the chair to Councillor Reid, we have a lot of home-based businesses obviously in the community, and but what we're seeing is with the emergence of the co-working spaces and the one that's next door here, company, we're seeing a lot of these local businesses that might be growing on the entrepreneurial side, or someone that's working remotely. We've been able to connect a few local entrepreneurs into that, and a couple of them were people that are working remotely as far away as places like Ontario. So what you're seeing is, and that's why you see Regis and Port Moody and Business Center Solutions, and you're seeing kind of an emergence of that co-working spaces, just because it's a way of cutting down the costs associated with real estate. In the same token, we went to the grand opening for company, and there was a couple of younger families that moved here, and they were at the opening, and the predominantly reason they came from Yaletown and Gastown, for all the reasons why people come to Coquitlam. It's a beautiful place, but baby number 2 was coming along, so someone was losing their office, and so they're moving into locations like company. So in the long term, I think if you look at it as a staggered development, it's incremental, but we could take those home-based businesses, take them into these co-working spaces, and maybe they grow their business, and down the road maybe they take grow to 5 employees and to take some space in the towers that have the office development coming along.
Yeah, because I didn't want to not go on the premise that we would build more office space, but one has to sort of wonder who's then going to take it up. And my last question then is about business retention or going after business. Are we pursuing any medical services in our community, like doctors?
Through the chair, I mean, we're not actively, it's not part of our business attraction efforts. That said, we do deal with doctors or dentists that, same as other businesses, that they contact our office. They're looking to
contact us, so we're not actually. Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marsden?
Thank you. Just in response to Councillor Reid's last question, there is a new doctor's office opening shortly, and I've been communicating through the Tri-City Health Through Communities. I met one of the Fraser Health people who connected me to the doctor, and I've liaised with Mr. Fuji in our planning department to move things along. They're getting close to, I believe their permits are issued. So they can get their tenant improvements completed.
But these were ones you mentioned 3 or 4 months ago, right?
Well, this is what it sometimes takes for these offices to come together. But these are like 4 to 5 that should see their offices opening in the very short term.
City Centre?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Did we have a motion has been moved and seconded? Yes. All in favor?
Yeah.
Anyone opposed? Carried unanimously.
Okay, but
easy
wise
one.
and one person. Yeah.
The last item on our agenda is Other Business 1. It's waste collection issues raised by Councillor Marsden.
Great, thank you. I'm going to have Ms. Warner join us. Over the last little while, and there's been a lot of chat about waste. There's a lot of talk about wildlife and the implications of that. And with some of the messages that we've received, emails or comments made online, I think there's a fair bit of misinformation out there. So I reached out to Ms. Warner and I said I'd like you to take the opportunity to maybe discuss a little bit about what has transpired with regards to some of the waste management, some of the work you've got underway, and perhaps some timelines for that, so residents that are concerned can get the real information as opposed to what is kind of being passed amongst themselves, that the city has done nothing with regards to it. So I know it's been an active file for you. Can you share some insight in what changes have happened and timelines for anything else?
Yep, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Marsden. Good questions. Certainly, we do continue to have a lot of bear activity in Coquitlam, significant amount of it, and garbage continues to be the #1 attractant for bears in our residential neighborhoods. In addition to continuing to patrol neighborhoods and look for attractant issues and respond to those complaints and follow up with our enforcement of our bylaw requirements, the city has been looking at a variety of ways in which we may be able to enhance our garbage collection system to further mitigate and support residents in mitigating attracting bears. So some of the things we've done, we did this season make some very minor tweaks to some of our collection routes, and I have to emphasize these are tweaks. So the way garbage collection occurs, they're set routes. The drivers are trained on those routes. They're also trained by the commodity, as it's called, so whether that's organic waste or the regular garbage. And then separately we have the recycling collection. So 3 separate commodities. The drivers have their routes and they're trained on collecting those commodities. So making changes to collection routes and collection zones is really, really complicated and very complex work. So notwithstanding, we do pay attention to where our highest risk areas are, where we're getting the most complaints for bear activity and bears accessing garbage on collection day, particularly as it relates to the collection issue. So this year we did we asked our contractor to make some shifts within these routes. So on the Monday zone, as an example, on one of those routes, we asked the driver to start further north on Burke Mountain. So keeping in mind, all of Burke Mountain is a bear area. This little bit of a tweak allowed for morning collection at the most northern part of northeast Burke Mountain on the Monday zone. On the Tuesday zone, we asked for a similar tweak to be made on one of the collection routes to facilitate early morning collection at the very north part of Westwood Plateau. And then in addition, we've also brought on what we call a special bear route. So we have access to, there's an extra truck that is used for offsetting mechanical issues on trucks or etc., just sort of helping out on the routes. We've asked for that truck to be dedicated to a bear route on our Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday zone. So this bear route occurs on Burke Mountain, it occurs Harbour Chines and Chineside. So these are tweaks. Now, another thing that we're looking at, which has been discussed here at the council table, and we are furthering our evaluation of more dramatic changes that we can make. And one of those ideas is whether or not we can split our collection routes into a morning and an afternoon collection. So right now we have 4 zones: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday collection zones. What we're looking at now is whether or not we can essentially have what would be 8 zones: a Monday morning zone, a Monday afternoon zone, a Tuesday morning zone, Tuesday afternoon zone, etc. So the idea would be the trucks would be able to focus, let's say anecdotally, they start at 7:30 in the morning, 7:30 to 1 p.m. we would focus them in what we would call a Monday morning zone, which in using this example, and this is just an example right now, that would be currently Burke Mountain, a portion of Burke Mountain. Then in the afternoon, we would move that truck to South Coquitlam, where bears are much less of a concern. And so the garbage would be less of a concern on the curb in the afternoon, say in the very south of Coquitlam, as it would in the very north of Burke Mountain. So this is something that staff is working on. It's very complex, but we have made a lot of progress on it, and we're actually now going through the process of actually looking at a route redesign and how that would look first on paper. Then we need to look at the scheduling of that. We also have our recycling to consider, which is collected by a different contractor. So we have actually discussed this with Recycle BC because it's important to have their buy-in so that we maintain collection of all 3 of those commodities, garbage, green, and recycling on the same days. They're working with us on this as well, so that's an important consideration. We anticipate having a draft redesign ready for discussion at the staff level and with our contractor this month, end of this month. Provided this looks feasible and realistic, then staff would bring this to council in the fall for council's consideration. And upon approval of council, and if this is the recommendation to move forward, then we would look at moving forward with a full-scale route redesign with a morning and afternoon collection scheduling, as I just described, in advance of next year's bear season. But again, this is early in that evaluation. We're working through the various complexities of it, and we want to bring forward a fulsome recommendation to council on that. The other important thing that we have been looking at as it relates to the collection program is the carts themselves. We do know that the clips on the green carts afford some degree of wildlife deterrent, some degree of bear deterrent. They're not bear proof. We've never said they were. We've been piloting the gravity locks, as council knows, with feedback from the residents on the street of some success with the gravity locks on the green carts and garbage carts. So this year we had our bins tested at a wildlife compound in Kamloops to actually get that answer back in a controlled test, a controlled setting by experts who do this. How bear-proof are these different locking mechanisms? So we have tested 3 different variations: the clips alone, the gravity locks alone, and then the clips with gravity locks as our third setup. And so we do have those results, and we will be writing that report for council again, targeting the fall. We do know that the most success is with the combination of the clips and gravity locks. That's not really surprising to us because that's what sort of the feedback we've heard from those who have been piloting them for us in the community, but we do have that information now definitively, so we will compile all that information and bring it formally to the council table through a report from staff. And those, maybe questions.
So obviously a lot of work's been done on it, and we've got more coming. Council will see some reports, but again, for those folks that are out there, read the stuff that our communications puts out. There is a lot of work being done to resolve this. This isn't, the concerns aren't falling on deaf ears, and you guys are trying to get a handle on how we do this better, and keep the bears out of the garbage as much as we possibly can. Recognizing they're going to adjust. If we just change routes, they're going to adjust.
Yeah, they will learn how to tell time.
Right, so it's important that we look at a number of solutions. So I appreciate that information. The other comment that's been made about the fines just aren't high enough, and we got to change people's behavior. So the fines got to be higher. They'll be $5,000. I've seen that number. Can you shed some light or share what is the maximum fine that we as a municipality are actually able to levy?
So under the BEN system, which is the system that City of Coquitlam uses, the maximum fine amount is $500. And that is the amount of these fines that we are levying for cart set out and or allowing wildlife bears to access garbage. So $500 is the maximum.
Is that per incident?
Yes, so that is per incident, and there have been situations where we have issued multiple fines for repeat occurrences. So staff does collect that information, and where the repeat occurrences are happening, we have issued multiple tickets when we need to. We do try to keep in mind that compliance is our ultimate goal, so there are other tools that we can also use, and we have used them. We have the ability under our bylaw to order residents to build enclosures or otherwise secure their garbage, so we have used that in the past as well. And then, of course, all of our other education and outreach, which you mentioned, Councillor Marsden, thank you for that.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate it. Again, I didn't want to get into the full-scale discussion here, but I'll give you the opportunity to share that there is work being done, and there's some timelines for the outcome of that work where council will be able to make some tough decisions. Because again, as we head into the fall season, the winters, the bears are looking for more food. They're active. I know just last night we hosted a block party, and the trash got put away, the recycling got put away, and 15 minutes later I heard the crash, and over went the bin with the gravity lock on it, so it didn't open, and there was the bear and mother bear.
Really?
And earlier this week, up the road, garbage hadn't been picked up yet, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon I got a phone call from my daughter who informs me there's a bear between her and the house, for a neighbor up the street, where the bear decided that while this neighbor, because I went up and checked it, this neighbor had done all their source separation. But you can't source separate diapers, and bears like diapers, as gross as that might seem. Yeah. And so that was in the garbage bin, and that's what it was going after, because they're right on the edge of the ravine. So again, it's a multitude of solutions is where I wanted to get at, and I appreciate that you and your team are working to try and come up with those. So thanks for your time.
Okay, we do have a few speakers here with questions for you. So, Councilor O'Neill.
Yes, thanks. I'm glad you touched on the issue of the clips, because it's the question I get from my neighbors that continues to kind of stump me. We've got the clips on the green cans, and some of my neighbors would sometimes store their green cans outside at the side of their house, think they can put all sorts of smelly stuff in there, put the clips on, and they're fine. And because the clips are there, and I'll keep the bears away, but they're not keeping the bears away. The bears can still smell. The garbage can get pushed all around, thrown down an embankment onto my driveway, and the can gets broken open. So I'm telling people, well, actually, don't use the clips. Don't put any green thing in there until the morning of your collection, because the green clips won't keep the bears out. the stinky stuff in the, keep your garbage, keep all your green stuff inside and in the freezer. Is there an appropriate time to put stinky garbage in the green bin and just clip it, unless it's indoors somewhere or locked up? Is there time where these can actually be used? I don't understand now, looking back, why we even have them, because we actually end up encouraging people to think they're safe to store. Can you talk about that? And looks like we're moving along with that, but what's the message right now about use of the clips, stinky garbage bean cans?
It's one of the, we hear this a lot, and the clips themselves, certainly an unintended consequence of the clips is the perception that's created that, oh, there's clips on these bins, therefore they're going to keep the bears out. They're not. The clips are not going to keep the bears out, depending where somebody lives, depending on the time of year. Unfortunately, garbage is a major attractant for bears, and really those bins are an attractant. So this is where, we really try to emphasize this is a whole community effort that's needed here. I think that the advice that you've provided is very consistent with the advice that staff provides. Depending on where you live, depending on the time of year, those clips are not going to be enough. Right. And so if you live in an area where there is a lot of bear activity, or any bear activity, then a higher degree of due diligence is required on your property. So that may mean those bins have to be stored inside a locked garage or a locked shed, in a basement if that's available. If those options are not available, then other efforts need to be made. So freezing the really smelly waste until collection day, like you described, etc.
So right now the only use for my clips is when I put my green bin on the side of the road, I lay the clips on top of the lid. And then when I come back a couple hours later, if they've been flopped over, I know that the garbage collection has taken place, and I don't have to stop the car and look at it. And so that's my little sign. That's the only time I use those things. It's just as a little signal. They're not clipped together. They're lying there, and then they can flop over. Oh, it's come by. I can move my thing back down. Otherwise, it was just a nice thought that never worked out, and I'm glad we're moving ahead and thinking of another solution. Thank you.
Mayor Stewart.
Okay. And those of us who don't live in that area of town, we clip things. We still don't put food waste in there during the week. We put food waste in typically cold or frozen on the collection, but we use our green waste for lawn clippings, certainly, but also for some non-smelly food-related stuff that it goes in there and clipped, well, potato peelings, for example. Corn peelings. But anyway, so you have to kind of be a little bit diligent to make sure you're not pulling the smelly stuff in there, but the purpose of the clips, or the function of the clips, it works. It works in that area of Coquitlam that isn't as bear active. Now, I happen to be answering a resident's question, and I sent it to council a map of Coquitlam bear sightings for the first 6 months of 2017, and there's a great portion of collection days, Wednesday and Thursday, and I'm on Thursday, that just don't see bears. We don't see that kind of bear activity that is prevalent in certainly Harbour Chines, Ranch Park, both Plateau and Burke Mountain. So I value the clips. I think they're useful, but they do introduce the other argument, of course, is why don't we put clips on the garbage cans? And in fact, we just got an email that said, because if you put a few slices of bacon in the garbage can, then the bears will get at it. And there's an obvious answer that bacon doesn't go in the garbage can, but there still is that level of confusion or in the debate over but the garbage, why doesn't the garbage get picked up till 7 o'clock at night? The bears get in there and they eat my leftover chicken. And it's not in your garbage can, surely. It's in your green waste. So I look forward to the report. I don't think we should have a great debate here, but I just wanted to respond to the reality that we clipped the right one. We didn't clip the other one. Soiled diapers is an issue, remains an issue, and I think we have to find a solution as a region to the soiled diaper thing, because we shouldn't be sending soiled diapers to when we agree that nothing organic should go in the landfill. Other than soiled diapers. Actually, soiled diapers are prohibited from the landfill, but they're also prohibited from the green waste, and therefore they end up in the landfill. So I think we're going to need to find a solution that probably runs the soiled diapers through the incinerator and gets it done with. That's my thoughts.
The old-fashioned way.
The old-fashioned way. There are diaper services and there are other solutions, but until we can find an answer to the soiled diapers, we can't be purist on the idea that the garbage can can't stink, because it can stink. And does.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the update now, and I know over the summer we did hear a lot about bear sightings and ideas and things, and I was really happy to hear that staff is looking at the possibility of doing those split routes. It's certainly something that I've been advocating for, but I know it comes with some challenges, including the recycling. That our partner who does the recycling, which is Recycle BC, not our contractor, and so I know that there's some things that need to be worked out with them. Like some of the previous discussions, particularly around the clips, the one that I still struggle with is how do we deal with the homes where they don't have garages? The older homes with carports, and the combination of clips and gravity locks probably may be a deterrent, but as we increase or improve our waste storage in other parts of the city, or neighbors do it, there's always going to be the path of least resistance. And to me, I think those may in the future become carports. And I think that in your report, if you can just look at options, I don't think that for everybody freezing garbage or putting their garbage can, as one resident said to me, I'm going to store my garbage can in my rec room. I think that we need to sort of see, are there some options of how we deal with those cans and how we secure those cans in those other 6.5 days, when it's not on the curb. So maybe if you can just, when you're doing your report, present some options of what we can consider. I know that we've talked about more clips, more gravity locks. That's, I suspect, a huge cost. Maybe we just look at those in the areas where internal, inside storage isn't an option. But I'm not so sure, as I've heard earlier, that even that's an option. That, from your studies, and I look forward to that report on what you've done in the Wildlife Center, that, you can't make a bear-proof can. You only make one that's resistant. And so I think if we could, in your report, look at sort of those options. And the other one is Councillor Marsden talked about the diapers. That is a real issue, because I can tell you, because of my my role with on Metro with zero waste, that we do struggle with what is the proper disposal for that, and to some extent also pet waste, and what are you supposed to do? And you don't want it in the green can, but you don't want the black, and so how that factors in, and that is obviously an attractant, and I think we maybe can answer some questions there in that report. And as I said, I look forward to that discussion. I have more questions and comments, but I just thought if we can at least get those out now in time for them to be considered in your report, that would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Seems like we're getting more and more issues. Is the bear population in our area growing that rapidly? Like, we're always told that if there were no houses on Westwood Plateau, that forest could could nurture 2 bears or whatever. But because there's all this garbage, the bear population has grown. First of all, I guess, is that accurate? Like, how much can a forest sustain? How many bears could a forest like that sustain? And is the population really growing that fast? And if it is, do we got to do something drastically different?
Those are really great questions, and unfortunately, they're not ones that I have an answer to. Conservation Officer Service has the responsibility to look at wildlife populations, bear populations. We don't as staff, track population, or can otherwise really provide that kind of expert advice on the population itself. What we do know is that this area, and Coquitlam in particular, and Port Coquitlam running a close second, is this area generates the highest call volume for the whole province. Whether that equates to population density, I don't know the answer. But we definitely generate the highest call volume, and the call volume is significant. So we also know, in the city of Coquitlam, we do have a very bear-aware community. Notwithstanding the issues we're talking about and the challenges that we're facing, our community, by and large, is very conscientious and aware of the bear population and the other wildlife that we share this community with, and they care. So we do generate phone calls just through awareness. So I really can't tell you how that equates to population. We could try to find that answer, but I don't even know for certain that the province tracks the population. But we can certainly put that question to them and see if we can get some information along those lines.
Well, it seems to me if we're developing policies and plans, it would be good to know how the population is now compared to where it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. It just seems like there's so much more activity. So that would be great, yeah. Talked about enclosures and how we can force a homeowner to build an enclosure. That's good news to me because I was wondering about that. But in your study or your report that you're putting together, are we looking at sort of a requirement for enclosures in new construction? Say a new house in Burke Mountain, rather than hoping that they're going to put the garbage cans in their garage, having a separate outside enclosure would be strong enough to keep a bear out.
I may need Mr. McIntyre to help me out with this one a little bit, but we have been, as we've been progressing with our new various neighborhood plans, we are putting in Bear Smart principles, and we have been including policies around garbage, space for securing garbage against wildlife attractants, etc. I'm just not quite certain that we have this in regulation. Jim, are you able to help out with that?
Certainly, pleased to do that. I can only answer in part through the chair. We've just in the bigger picture, I think we've taken a more proactive role in terms of garbage and recycling and the facilities and size and that, with more multifamily, ironically, than we have with single family. I think it comes up on discussion. Certainly, it's surfaced recently with the look at the single family zones, the RS7, RS8 zones, and accommodating additional space for parking. And coincidentally, one of the potential advantages of having a little wider side yard for an area for a non-aligned parking stall, third parking stall we've talked about, it may free up space too for storage for waste receptacles and recycling. So we're looking at that. I need to look further into that with staff as to what could be required as opposed to guidelines, and I think that's something we would need to delve into. On a more personal note, I do know about a bear enclosure. I built one for myself in my house. I'm up on the plateau on Waterford because there's just not enough room in the garage. I'm not alone with that, and I built an enclosure. I'm fortunate I got a fairly wide side yard on one side, and it withstood a bear attack successfully. And
maybe it doesn't have to be in the side yard, maybe it's in the backyard. We keep our green waste in our garage because we don't have room in the freezer for the amount of green waste that we produce, and it just reeks. And yeah, maybe I should clean it more often, but I'm considering building an enclosure because I don't want to keep it in my garage. So I know we can't change the building code. I don't know if it's possible for us just to require if we're building all these houses in the area where we have the biggest bear problem, well, maybe let's be a little bit proactive and require, it's a lot easier and cheaper to build it at the time than after the fact. We've had 3 people talk about diapers and how much of a problem it is. What do we recommend people do about diapers? Because I have no idea what.
Go back to the old-fashioned way.
Clean them.
Like a young family who's got a couple kids in diapers or one kid in a diaper. What do we suggest that they do? Liners.
Well, I mean, the ultimate recommendation remains the same. The bins are not bear-proof. The only actual bear-proof solution that we know of is just store it inside. So it is a challenge for homes that have young ones and diapers. And
so again, this could be where an enclosure could be helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, secure, locked inside is the way that we know that we can deter attracting a bear to diapers or whatever other smelly garbage a resident may generate.
I can't imagine keeping a garbage can full of diapers in my garage, let alone my green waste. Okay.
Hockey equipment's bad enough.
My hockey equipment doesn't stink. Smells fine to me, at least. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Reid.
Okay, so this is going to be right off the wall.
Uh-oh.
Everybody goes, oh.
Not a first.
Buckle your seatbelt.
Well, years ago, I was doing some auditing work for a hotel up in Whistler. And at that time, there were a whole bunch of single-family homes up there, but it was a huge bear problem because, of course, we were going up into the woods like we are here. So you used to have to take the garbage to one spot in one of those giant, I think the first one they got was probably scrunched, but after a while they got one great big garbage thing and everyone knew they had to have their garbage in there by Wednesday night or something so the truck could come along. So we have lots of multifamily here, and of course ours isn't a problem because it's all inside in a huge bin and then it goes. But when I think of what Jim just said about all the houses that are so close, so on a block you could have 20 houses, right? So that's 20 stops for a truck. What if there was one huge community, massively unmovable garbage spot, maybe one every 2 blocks or something in the bear aware areas? Just asking, it's better than your freezer, it's better than, I mean, I'm just
Post office.
well, I'm just asking because maybe it's not that far-fetched. And then instead of the truck coming along, stopping 20 times to pick up 20 cans, he'd go to one area and pick up one massive can that would have been, you can just stick the garbage in like a flip-flop thing where the bears can't access. I know it's probably stupid, but I don't know if anybody else has done that. Like, what other areas could you think of, maybe up north, that might have some kind of a communal garbage for the green waste? I'm not expecting you to say, oh, wow, what a great idea, because it's probably a really off-the-wall concept. But if we're going to keep building up and keep building smaller lots so that we get more houses and then more garbage cans, maybe it's even going to be more monetarily efficient than what we're doing now.
I don't think it's as off the wall or uncommon. It's perhaps not common it's not common in Metro Vancouver.
Maybe Coquitlam's solution to a problem we have.
Centralized garbage collection happens in Canada, it happens in North America, it happens around the world. So it is something that's done. You mentioned Whistler. I believe it's been done in Jasper, another bear community. Europe, centralized collection is fairly common in Europe. Now, how common that is associated with single-family residential, I'd have to do a bit of research into that. But centralized collection is seen around the world. So
yeah, I know Jim's not excited about it because it'd be hard to plan a really cute-looking garbage can, but it's just, I don't know. We got to do something, and I don't think what we're doing is efficient. So I'll leave that with you. I said it would be off the wall.
There you go. Okay, well, I have myself down next, and then you're after me. I just want to share, I was up in Whistler a couple weeks ago with my kids, and to their disdain, I spent quite a bit of time talking to the people up there, and I actually went to the transfer station. They're a bear smart community. It seems like Whistler has figured out what to do. So I just want to share with you some of the stuff that I learned. I told them about while I was up there was when this email was going around and there was lots of discussion. So I just want to take a couple minutes to tell you, they take it very seriously, and I kind of agree with Councillor Wilson. I think about being drastic, I kind of do think we're at that point where we have to get a little bit drastic. They told me that a size of the whole Whistler area, and I don't know what that really means, but in that big massive area, the way nature is, that typically only 8 to 10 bears live there, but they have 130, and that's because of the restaurants and the humans habituating them. So these bears are garbage bears. They don't shoot them, but it is true that the way bears live, they live in very big, large pieces of forest. So like what you said, it would be 2 on Whistler Plateau. That sounds about right. So the fact that we seem to have so many bears in Coquitlam, we get blamed, is because we're developing, but no, the bears are coming because we are providing a smorgasbord for them. So anyways, I want to get that in there. It's not typical to have this many bears. They don't have any curbside pickup up there. Everybody has to package up their garbage and drive it to 2 spots, Nestor's and somewhere else. The transfer station is away from the main urban part of Whistler, and he was very proud to show me that no wildlife can get in. There's rolls on the gate and there's electric fence and whatnot. But he says a huge thing is education. And that picture that we were sent was pictures of garbage cans, the black bins. There shouldn't be anything in there that is attracting the bears. Diapers. He said that double bag them. You have lots of diapers, flush what you can, wrap up the rest. I mean, I used to use disposable diapers. You can wrap them up really tight, use the sticky things, keep it tight. You flush what you can, and then you double bag it in the plastic and you put a knot, and that will reduce it. And he said random audits. He said they went through, actually I don't know if they went through it or they talked about it, but another city did, where they made everybody use clear garbage bags for the black bins. And they would do random audits. And if they saw any food in there, you educate the resident and then fine them the next time. Just to keep the organics out of the garbage so the bears aren't. But he ended on the note, I found this funny, he ended on the note that a bear is really just a nose with a bear attached. That they have, he said that about 5 times, that their sense of smell is so strong.
I don't know how.
Yeah. But we do have to take this seriously. I mean, the fact that we have so many bears living in this small of a city, when a place like Whistler should only have 10, shows that we as a society are doing something wrong.
Did you go to see the bear bin?
No.
They put their garbage in?
I didn't go. No.
The central garbage?
I didn't go there. I went to the little city hall, municipal hall, village hall, and then to the transfer station. It was a great conversation, but they're very passionate about keeping their bears alive and educating. They have a lot of tourism, so it's different than here. So curbside wouldn't really work because of the high level of tourism as well. But there's no curbside pickup. Everybody has to bring it. It's manned. It's locked up. It's the restaurants, really, that cause the issue. But I think that's about it. There was some good ideas there. Oh, another thing he did say, and I don't know how I feel about it, but that we're never going to get to 100% where people aren't contaminating the garbage with organics. So in some areas, we may want to consider locks on the garbage bins. I struggle with that because that's like saying some people are still going to smoke in parks and forests, so let's put in ashtrays. And then that's kind of saying, oh, go ahead and smoke in our parks because here's an ashtray. Yeah. So I struggle with that. Oh, we're going to put a lock on your garbage and people will stop diverting. But that was what he said. And if we have some areas of our city that have really bad problems with bears, we're never going to get to 100% where the black bin doesn't smell. And we may want to consider that, but that's for further discussion. I wanted to share what I learned. It was very, like I said, my kids weren't happy with me, but I feel like it was a really good field trip.
Really, the transfer station didn't interest them?
No.
They called it a joke.
It stunk. So
somebody is still doing it then?
Who? Sorry, doing what?
They're still taking stinky garbage into one central place.
Well, that's the transfer station, I think, is everything. He was quite proud of his compost, and yeah, I could have been there all day. They were very proud of what they're doing.
Field trip.
Yep. So that's what I learned. Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you. I guess one of the things is communication. I'm proud of our city. I mean, we've taken bears and bearware seriously. We're one of the few cities in Lower Main that are recognized as bearware certified. So, I mean, we've done a lot of work in this area. But I think communication is sometimes part of the issue. The tweaks you did on Burke Mountain, I know about 3 weeks ago or so, garbage use, my greenhouse picked up early in the morning, between 7 and 8, sometimes 9. And it was like 11 o'clock still and it picked up. And I called in, I was like, what's going on? And the comment was, we've adjusted our schedule. We're starting at the top of the mountain, coming down. But I think we generate complaints from the publics, like myself, that didn't know that my scheduled pickup is now changing. And so I think that's where we're going to get complaints, because we make a tweak, because we do recognize a problem, but we didn't communicate it out well, because even if I didn't know that it was being tweaked out there. So that's one thing I think we have to do a better job on. And I know we've got a Recollect app and everything, but there's got to be some better way of messaging people when you change that, because that was just like this morning I left again. But I realized it's getting picked up later. And so the other thing I do, every time our green can's picked up, we hose it out, tip it over, let it dry out, and it doesn't stink at all. If you just be diligent about it, we do that all the time. There is no stink in your can. You don't want to attract anything else. You just have to be diligent about it. But I think we're going the right direction on this. I'm looking forward to the reports coming back, because I think I mentioned when this issue came up when council talked about it, I mentioned that Stephanie's working on this, that we've already been advised that we're being worked on this, and it's not something you can change overnight just to suit a couple complaints. But once again, I think the fines, we sort of pulled back. We were fining $500, and we sort of said, no, we'll allow a $250 fine if you pay up right away. So we kind of softened up a little bit. We went through that about a year ago when we got a fine on that and somebody was complaining. So I think what you've done lately, I like the blitzes you've been doing, the stickers on the cans. And I think as the education is one of the biggest things, but the enforcement has to be noted all the time. And I think we have to be more publicized about how many enforcements we're doing and how much we are trying to do, and notifying the areas that are a problem and put it out there. So those areas will actually people understand, well, why aren't you guys? Because you look on Facebook and the Burke Mountain Facebook, a lot of people are very passionate about doing the right thing and getting after people that are doing the wrong thing. So I think we can use those communication channels better. We'll get better compliance down the road. But communication, especially when you make changes, is really important. That's why I understand the need to come to the options, because when we do make a change, it has to be well publicized out for doing a major change. But on this little change here, I bet you we're getting a lot of calls just because people don't realize they've had to change their pickup to being later than earlier than where it was. That's just better communication.
Absolutely. I mean, communication is a complicated one. Also, we work really closely with Kathleen's group, and we have an extremely robust outreach program. So I take your point, absolutely. I didn't get into it in my preamble when I was saying sort of some of the things we've done, but I will bring this back to council more fulsome in the fall. We have a number of new initiatives this year, some new videos, a variety of different ways that we're reaching out constantly trying to get ahead of that communications curve and figure out how we reach people. I take your point on the tweaks that we made in those zones, and we were ready that some people like yourself would kind of notice and say, hey, what's going on? We did provide some light communication on it, but it was intentional in this case to not advertise this particular tweak, I'm going to call it, because the counter effect to that is the amount of people who are going to call us and say, well, what about my area? What about my area? What about my area? And we're not quite ready for that yet. But when we do get ready to make a more significant change, we will absolutely have extensive outreach on that to everybody. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Mayor Stewart?
Just one last couple of comments. I actually went with, during that silly mayor's thing, through Jasper. And Jasper has the centralized locations for pickup, but they're at the end of each block. So you walk down to the end of the block, and next to the unlucky house are these two partly buried bins that one's organics and so that's where you put your solid waste and your organics. And it gets, I don't know how often it gets picked up, but clearly you recognize they're nestled in the forest. They absolutely don't want to be killing bears, and they go to great lengths, and that's a pretty significant step. My concern remains, we had a complaint I received a complaint from a resident on Danzy, or one of the Millardville streets, where she said, my neighbor right across the street leaves the garbage cans out on the street all week. But her complaint wasn't that the bears were getting at it, because there were no bears ever seen on her street. It was because of the unsightliness of having garbage cans there, and she wanted us to enforce the rules. And so I did the map, and I sent it to you guys, and I said, here's the map of the bear sightings in your neighborhood, and there haven't been any, etc. Now, we recognize that moves around a little bit, but we, until recently in Cape Horn, had seen bear activity a whole lot. We hadn't seen any on our street, and now we're seeing it. So I'm adamant that my neighbors are going to stop doing the overnight. We had some neighbors still putting it out at 6 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock at night on Wednesday night, since we're Thursday. I want us to be one of those communities, one of those neighborhoods where the bears aren't there, so we can do the afternoon pickup while you schedule someone else for the morning pickup. But it won't happen if people in those areas are too relaxed and put the garbage cans out the night before, because we're connected by Mundy Creek to Mundy Park. We've got all kinds of ravines. There's no reason why the bears aren't in our neighborhood, and it's not because we're better at garbage. Clearly, some of our residents are pretty relaxed about that, although we do have big garages, and that might be a function of where bears end up setting up. On the issue of whether the fine is high enough, I suspect it is. Do you have any idea whether people aren't getting the message after the first fine? I've heard a couple of people that contacted me, and I know other members have heard the complaints about, how dare you, $500 fine, well, it's only $250, but that's way too much, and that sort of stuff. Is recidivism an issue with bear scofflaws?
We have very few repeat offenders once they've received a ticket. We have a little less success when it's the warning, but since we've instituted the warning sticker, we're seeing improvement with the sticker, but we get our ultimate success with compliance, unfortunately, following a ticket.
Yeah, it's been the case in our neighborhood where quite a few of the 9 p.m. garbage cans have stickers on them, and that's clearly a fine would be more impressive. So I don't think we have to raise the fine. We obviously can't, but I think it's sufficient we just have to do it more regularly and make sure people understand that this is something we have to stop that behavior. And the last thing is multilingual communications. I know that there are still some who suggest, and I suspect it's true, that there are some families that don't understand for linguistic reasons, and to what extent are we able to get through that challenge?
So a number of our communications we've actually progressed with having them produced in multiple languages. So that's one thing we've done. Another thing we did this year is we're moving away a little bit from words. That's some of the feedback we got. They're just too wordy. So we are moving towards icons. So, a clock for the set out time, etc. We have, I know Kathleen could probably tell you the number, but at least a dozen now. And so we're using visual aids. And we always include, the city's phone number, etc., various ways. We also use the different media channels that communicate with through the different languages. Kathleen may have more to add on that, but we are very cognizant of the community and the different demographics and languages present in this community, and we try really hard to figure out every way possible to communicate our message as clearly and easily as we can.
They all understand the dollar sign.
Thank you, Stephanie. Kathleen, you wanted to say something?
Thank you. So on the topic of translated materials, we've got 2 campaigns that we're about to kick off in the next week or so. One is supports peak week, which is when the bears really ramp up with the hyperphagia. And so we have a number of translated ads going in ethnic publications to reach out there. In addition, on the website, we've posted the translated materials. And the second campaign is one that you referred to earlier, which is understanding what goes in a green cart and what goes in a garbage cart, and we're calling them contamination culprits. And so we're focusing education on that too, to try to keep things that shouldn't be in those carts out of those carts. So you will see over the next couple of weeks, to Councillor Asmundsen's point, a lot of communication on this topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, one last comment that I had at the tip of my tongue and I was about to say, and now I'm scrambling to try to remember it. No.
Old age.
Old age.
Old timers.
Oh, good papers. I've raised it repeatedly at Metro Vancouver, and I know that our representatives on Zero Waste have raised it. Does Metro Vancouver have a solution yet? Or could we set up at, say, the Town Center Recycle or someplace, a secure shipping container with a small hole that you can put your diapers through, have it vented so that it doesn't stink, or rather that the stink is at 20 feet in the air at 25 feet, and have it dealt with separately by the regional waste system, such as everything in a diaper ship gets burnt in the same way that medical waste gets burnt and those sorts of things. We should be incinerating these things rather than storing them in our landfills and letting them produce methane gas for the next 25 years.
I am not aware of initiative related specifically to diapers, but it certainly is a good point, and we'll be sure to raise it when we get that opportunity.
Let's champion it.
Well, we did.
I'll bring it up. It hasn't, to be honest.
We had diapers and we had kitty litter.
This specific initiative hasn't come up at Zero Waste, but it hasn't come up at Zero Waste, but we do from time to time have the discussion about pet waste and others, so maybe it's time to at least bring that idea forward, so I will bring it up with the committee.
Certainly pet waste and kitty litter.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything else? Thank you very much. Very good discussion. I look forward to your report.
Adjourn. Second. All in favor? Oh, sorry.
All in favor? Anyone opposed to adjourning? Okay. Unanimously. Thank you.